Thank you, Sandy. Good evening. I am Matt Borelli, Chair of the Select Board. This open meeting of the board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. Portions of this meeting will allow for public comment as stated in the agenda. For this meeting, the board is convening by Zoom as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Now, to confirm that we have a quorum of the board and that everyone can hear and be heard, I'll call the name of each member. Please respond that you are here and can hear the meeting. Dan.
Here.
Marcus.
Here.
Marianne.
Here.
And I'm assuming everybody can hear me. Thank you very much. Meeting business ground rules, just a couple of things as we turn to the first item on the agenda. Permit me to cover some ground rules. Number one, please remember to mute when you are not speaking. Please remember to address the chair with any questions or comments and wait to be called on. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. As a first order of business, I would ask for a motion that this meeting will continue at the next posted meeting of the board if a technical problem develops. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Dan,
Yes.
Marianne,
Yes.
Marcus,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. And I will just note that Lakshmi is unable to attend this evening's meeting due to a prior commitment. So the first item on the agenda is the continued public hearing, Gordon's Fine Wines, 150 Gould Street, David Gordon, proposed manager. It has come to our attention that Mr. Gordon wishes to postpone until May 11th, until there is a full complement of the board. So with that, I would ask for a motion to postpone this public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And just as way of discussion, this is the last all alcohol license that's available. And in prior discussions with the board, we've talked about possibly opening up the amount of licenses moving forward for the town. And I think that's just something as we move forward, would like to get on the agenda. As far as I'm concerned, I'd just like to hear from other members briefly on that subject. Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, I would agree. We have, and I'll just kind of plow over this a little bit because the membership has changed a little bit. All communities have a quota of package store licenses that they can issue that's based on population. But Needham was a dry town entirely for many years after the end of Prohibition. And even after we began issuing, we adopted allowances for restaurant licenses, we still had no package store licenses until basically a little after 2010. And at the time that the select board really wanted to initiate that discussion, there was a lot of resistance in the community to allow it to going to having package stores here. And so the compromise that was worked out and was ultimately approved through special legislation and a referendum was basically, we have package stores here, but we have a half quota based on population. That might not be exactly the math, but it's a half quota. And we've done pretty well with the businesses that we've licensed, but basically it's probably a prudent thing not to issue all the licenses you have, because you might have a real superstar business or opportunity come to town. And if you don't have a license that they need in order to do business, your only relief is to go to the legislature. And in Needham, because of the path that we've followed, which is a little outside of the regular statutory form, our path is actually more complicated to get additional licenses. So I think my own thinking is a couple of things. We have one wine and malt license that's in the barn still, and one all alcohol. I want to be very cautious about issuing those, but also I think that, and I'd like to actually renew this discussion when Lakshmi is here, because it really is, this is a full board decision, and get everybody up to speed. But if there's a consensus on the board, I think the time has come to review the question of whether or not Needham would be better off having a full statutory quota of alcohol licenses for package stores. And if the answer to that is yes, we would then, that would mean initiating the process to achieve that, which, as I understand it, because of our set of rules, would mean our board would have to approve. We'd have to take it to town meeting as a home rule petition, which is a statute affecting one town. We would then, a home rule petition then has to go to the state legislature and be approved there and signed into law. And then after that, because every one of our major decisions on liquor and Needham, liquor licensing, has been subject to referendum, I would expect that the legislature will tell us that this one needs a referendum too. So we'll probably have to go to the voters. So this is a process that might be a year and a half or so to accomplish it on the fast track. And so at least if we're interested in doing it, it would be good to begin talking about it soon. So sorry to take so much time, but that's my opinion, and hopefully it helps frame this.
No, and I appreciate that, Dan. Obviously, we're not going to have an in-depth discussion tonight, but I just wanted to put a primer when Lakshmi's here to have that discussion moving forward. Any other comments on this? Okay. Yeah. Yep.
Matt, I would just say that I also think that we are at this point past due on this discussion, and that it is an important conversation for us to have and understand what that timeline potentially looks like.
I agree. Great. Any other comments? Okay. Hearing none, we come to the vote. Mary Ann?
Yes.
This is on the motion to continue
Motion.
the Gordon's hearing.
Exactly, Dan. Marcus?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, public hearing, retail package store, Needham General Store, 399 Great Plain Avenue, Needham. And Sandy, if we could bring the proponents in, please.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and we're just waiting for Mike. There he comes in. Good evening.
Hi. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all of you taking the time to consider our proposal tonight. So this is our first time, so let me know if I'm doing things wrong, but I guess I just start with talking about what we are expecting or hoping to accomplish with this.
Yes, so why don't we'll just frame this here. So you have the Needham General Store, which people may or may not be. I hope they are. It's a terrific place across from Hersey Station. And you have an existing business, and you're looking to now apply for a beer and wine only license. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Great. So
Yeah,
with that,
so
framework, yes, please tell us more about your proposal.
Yeah, so we opened in January of 2020. And so if people haven't seen what we've done to the old mini mart, I would highly recommend people come on in and check it out. We really tried to focus on the needs of the neighborhood, especially given the pandemic. We really switched it from what it was, which is sort of a neglected convenience store, to really be a neighborhood spot for everything general store items. So we have grocery items, we have gifts, we the candy and these things for the kids as well. But I think it's just really being able to have a lot of local fresh items for people. Like, so we get brought in Bianco's meats, Panadosi's breads, oh my God, bagels. So we really tried to find a lot of local places that we could really share with the community, because at this point, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, people were scared to go into the grocery store. So it really helped us define who we were as a business. We knew we wanted to be a general store that sold a little bit of everything, but I feel like at this point with with the pandemic kind of pushed us into something more that really served the community, excuse me, in a different way, and really focusing on local local businesses as well. We feel like that's really important. We've also partnered with artists to bring in local artists each month to really, like to be part of the community. Something that a lot of people had asked for us was to try to get beer and wine, because they can come in and get most of their dinner, but can't, get that additional piece. So we didn't want to get anything, big liquor, any of that stuff. We just really wanted to focus on some craft beers and, nicer, small selection of wines, just to sort of complement that this is the spot where you can really come to get anything. Right now our hours, we're open 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. If we get this license, we're hoping to expand that to really help, the dinner crowd a little bit on that end. But, at the end of the day, I feel like it's really important for us to support this community in any way we can. In addition, we've brought in, PPE and masks, and we never thought we'd be having those as well. So it's just been, I feel like at the end of the day, we really want to be able to support this community and give them everything they need in one spot.
Great, thank you. Just a couple questions, and then Mike, if you want to speak as well. As far as the display, I see a proposal, a small display of beer and wine, is that correct?
Yeah, so right now, currently, we have sort of chips. If you've been in the store, there's like a Lay's rack there and a microwave with some other things. So that's going to go away. We're going to move that to another side of the store. We want to do a small refrigerator for refrigerated beers and any of those white wines that would be cold. And then next to that, we'd have a custom built, just a wood rack for wine. So it's also really close to the register too. We think it's important for any kind of safety concerns as well.
Great, thank you. Mike, if you could just introduce yourself, and I don't know if you have any further comments on this application at the time.
How you doing, everybody? I'm Manager Mike. I don't know if you've seen any of the videos. So what's going on, Needham? So yeah, this is kind of like my sister said, we wanted to have a little bit of everything for everybody. So, just adding this is just another piece that we can offer the community. And especially one thing, I'm there, pretty much every day, but like one thing that I did hear from a lot of the community was that there was nothing really on this side of Needham that had this to offer. So that's just something else that's going to help us out, just to be able to be more of a community driven general store. And I absolutely promise that no matter what, even if you look like you're 92, you're gonna get carded from me if that all rolls through. So really, it's something that we do take very seriously as well. I mean, I do joke around and stuff, but it is a serious thing as well. So yeah, we love being a part of the community, and yeah, we're excited. Like my sister said as well, it's the local craft beers. So I mean, that's kind of one of the things that we'd like to really push is anything that's local, especially the local small businesses. So
terrific, and you have a nice following and a terrific business. You've been a good neighbor, so thank you. Discussion, and then I'm going to open up. This is a public hearing, but discussion at this time from members of the board. Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, I want to say something, and then the applicants can speak to it if they want. But this is, everything everybody said is it's a great business. These are wonderful, good people. They're really committed to the community and a lot of good values. And I wish them all the best. And you're working hard, and that's. But this, for me, is not a good location for a package license. The intersection of Broad Meadow Road and Great Plain is a known hazard at certain times of the day, particularly when it's dark out and there's a lot of rush hour traffic and the trains are coming in and people are dotting back and forth. Having someone and this isn't going to be anything that Megan or Mike do. This is going to be some customer that thinks that they can just make a quick stop and run in and grab a 6-pack. That I've already seen too many near misses in the street there, and I don't want to do anything to make it worse. And so I'm sorry, I don't see myself voting to support the application. But if there's anything to be said about it, well, then certainly I know they're working. I know that Megan and Mike, that you're working hard, and if you want to speak to it, that's fine. But This for me is a very, very potentially difficult location, and to add, you know, the package to it is one too much for me.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Megan or Mike, if you could speak to that issue, I'm assuming people currently run in and out for various items. So if you could talk about kind of the habits
Sure.
of the shopper.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I don't know if we could throw my husband Mark on this as well. I don't know if we can link Mark Pashon. He's been in the Dunkin' business for over 30 years, so I feel like he has a lot more
Yes.
experience in different you know, locations and operating businesses. But I will say there is a crosswalk, and I think we have done a really good job with curbside, both for, you know, the Dunkin' side and for the general store side, where we've been bringing things right out to customers on both sides of the street, and we haven't had any issues from our end. But I, you know, certainly respect that, and I don't know if we can put Mark on and,
Yeah,
and
Mark-
allow him
Mark
to
is
speak
on.
to that.
Sure. Mark,
Yes,
recognize
okay.
you. Yep.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us tonight. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I'd say when I was going for the license to buy the Dunkin' Donuts, I went in front of the board and I made a promise to the town that I would make the sidewalk safer by putting more planters. There was a concern with Birds Hill, I guess people used to park up on that sidewalk. So I think we've done a really good job and shown that we've made it a lot safer. The crosswalk is literally right there. There's a light with a thing. To me, no different than downtown. I mean, crossing the street downtown versus, you know, here. So I think, you know, having that crosswalk there protects people crossing the street. And then, you know, we have the cars turn over fairly regularly. There's most of the time out front, there is open parking at the store that you can get in pretty easily. And like I said, now that we've done the front, there's a lot more focus and a lot more attention to that area. I found just in the short period of time we've been there, the cars are definitely slowing down. They know that, you know, that Birds Hill area has been there for years, and people utilizing the pharmacy and the gas station. I guess that would be my point.
Okay, thank you for that. Mike, briefly, and then I'm going to open it up to the public.
I was just going to second what Mark was saying about the crosswalk, and message was saying about the crosswalk. It was actually just recently updated in the past, maybe 6 months, 4 to 6 months, where they do have the chirping as well as the blinking lights that I've utilized numerous times. And like Mark said, I don't think that necessarily that intersection is as busy sometimes as the one like where the Needham Fine Wine's right in that center. But I do respect that that opinion, absolutely.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Are there members of the public who wish to speak? And if so, please raise your hand and we will pull you over. Okay, Elizabeth and Steve Handler.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to bring them over, or do you want them to just speak?
If they could just speak, sorry.
Okay. You are able to speak if you unmute. There you go.
Hi, it's Elizabeth Handler. Steve and I have lived at 317 Great Plain Avenue for almost 30 years, if you can believe it, which is less than a quarter mile from this. First of all, I'm disappointed that this is the first that I happened to look at the agenda packet this week and to find that this was the first to hear. This was the first time I heard about that this was being proposed. I don't know if there's a requirement that neighbors need to be notified of this. Steve and I are not that keen on the idea of the Needham General Store selling alcohol. I don't go in, I've only been in a couple of times. I'd have to go in again to see, you know, where exactly you're doing this, that you have enough room to sell all the things you do sell and to also sell alcohol. I do greatly appreciate the improvements that have been done to keep people from parking on the sidewalk. That has been, I really appreciate that. That's a great improvement. There are, as my husband wanted to note, that there are children that of all ages going in and out at all the time. So I know that that's something I do appreciate, that if this is approved, that you'll be carding everybody. Yeah. Card that 80-year-old person. Absolutely. Make it clear that everybody gets carded. I'm more concerned about traffic at night. As I said, we've lived here 30 years. Traffic can be really awful along that stretch. And I'm more concerned about nighttime. And when the traffic is not too heavy, people tend to speed along that stretch, which is why various things have been done to the sidewalk and to the lights to try to discourage speeders. And then I have one question, which I know doesn't have to be answered because this is only a hearing, but just a question because I don't know. How restrictive is the license? The proposal says that they want to use about 10 square feet of space. If this license is received, is that part of the restriction? Will it only be that 10 square foot of use, or will the owner be allowed to expand that going forward? That's all I needed to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's my understanding that that's the proposal, and an expansion of that use would have to come back. Is that correct, Sandy? So that's the answer to that question. And those comments are received. Heather?
Hi, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Good. So we live on Broad Meadow, very close, and I would second the congestion, and I feel they do speed, and that crosswalk actually seems to be a little worse. I think the center barrel actually had people slow down more than the lights on the sides. There's an awful lot of garbage around, and I've noticed there's garbage even in the newspaper containers that are empty now over by the bus or whatever. There's a big glass container, train station, sorry. So I think that's really what we're concerned about. And of course, the children, we just have already an awful lot of Dunkin' Donuts containers, et cetera, around the property. So I think we've said everything. Did I miss anything? Okay. Thank you very much for allowing us to speak. Yes.
Thank you for those comments. Thank you. And who could answer this? Maybe Megan or Mark. Your total square footages of the premises is what? I'm trying to go through my packet here, but roughly, do you know? In other words, this is going to take a small area of your store. So I guess where I'm coming from is the draw is more of a convenience, not like a package store where people are going in and out. It's really going to change the use of the store. That's my opinion. It's one person here looking at this and saying, if we're looking to put a liquor store here, that might be this traffic boon or this, people coming in, but this to me might be complementary or would be complementary. And also you did meet with our economic development, Amy, right?
Yes, we met with Amy. Amy came walked through the store with us as well. And it's such a small area that we're really, to your point, it's absolutely a complementary. It's nothing. I don't envision 25-year-olds running in for a case of Bud Light. We won't even have that type of beverage, I feel like, from what it could be as far as the increase in traffic. I feel like it's more of just the convenience and the complimentary items that they would get, the families would get with their dinner sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just like to add,
Yes,
a couple quick points. And I think everybody in the town can see what we've done to the exterior of the building and the patio. And, I think to me, it looks miles ahead of and nicer for the community. So everything we're doing is to really help even make the community even look nicer. I think one quick note too is we did lose, just to show how cognizant we are of the community, we lost 25% of the revenue by not selling cigarettes. So that's how much we really care about the community and want to and be a part of it. So it just, that's the type of people we are. We put beautiful plantings out front and, new awnings, and I think really tried to make a classy looking spot there. So that's all I would say. And we do clean it all the time. We're out front all the time, cleaning it, anything on the sidewalk, even on the street. So.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that, Mark. I feel like that's really important to mention is the fact that very first thing we did was get rid of cigarettes, and every single vendor thought we were crazy because, you know, we lost so much revenue, but it was important for us and for the community. And to the point of, yeah, a lot of kids come in there. We didn't want to have to worry about that. So that's a great point.
Okay, thank you. I see Heather wants to speak in, but before that, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this matter before I go back to Heather? Okay, and if not, Heather, you will be the last speaker before we close this public portion. Thank you, Heather.
I've got, yeah.
Hi, this is Heather's husband, Frank. You guys spoke about you cleaned up the place. You've only got the one garbage container there. Where on Broad Meadow, we have garbage all day long. Dunkin' Donuts containers left on our property all day long. And I guess I just don't see the need for, again, we're against it. I mean, there's a liquor store in Needham Center 5 minutes away. And I know you said it's complimentary. It's a very congested area. So if we add 10 or 15% more traffic at night, it's going to be an issue for kids, for commuters. It's a very congested area. I just want to stress that.
Okay, thank you for those comments. And I will ask then, if you look in the trash issue, either way this thing goes, maybe adding another receptacle, just something to keep in mind as a comment. And I do see one more, Mike. Yeah, Mike, go
Hello,
ahead.
sorry, you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sure. So I just wanted to say I'm a lifelong Needham resident, 44. And the folks at the general store, my wife and myself, we actually own a small company where we manufacture boutique clothing and like artisan woolen items. And I reached out to them a while ago, and they decided to pick up our products for the fall. They really didn't have to do that, but I just wanted to let you guys know that they're supporting a Needham resident, and it's been really nice that they're willing to go ahead and do that. Secondly, to be honest with you, I see it as a positive. If anything, if people from the Birds Hill area are going into the center of town to buy alcohol there, you're asking for a lot more congestion. Why not make it available where they are? And then to the point that someone mentioned earlier, as far as the amount of traffic at that liquor store right in downtown Needham Center where the Crest used to be years ago, I mean, that is 10 times more traffic than you would ever see in Birds Hill. So I just don't understand that argument. I get the whole thing about the Dunkin' Donuts cups, and yeah, I mean, I haven't, I certainly can understand that sucks. I've been by our street has been dealing with this construction for 3 years with all the new wiring coming in, so I get that. But I think if they clean that up, I really don't see it being an issue.
Okay, Mike, just for the record, can you state your full name and address, please?
Sure, yeah, Mike Simprucci, 10 Richardson Drive, Needham.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for those comments.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to close the public portion of this hearing. Board discussion, comments? Mary Ann.
So I just had a couple of questions. I noticed that we have the tip certification for Megan, and I was wondering if Manager Mike was also planning to do a tip certification since you're the guy on the spot? Yes? Oh, you're on mute. I think.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I just saw that. Yeah, I was like, I actually just got the card in the mail the other day. It's in my wallet. It's in
Okay.
here, but yes, I did just get, I got my on-premise certification.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
I do know, and I appreciate that you all have been a fan favorite and all the support that you've given to the community since you opened. It was interesting to me listening to some of that feedback from the neighbors. I appreciated the feedback about the orange barrel and that maybe that was actually helpful in addition to the push button lights. Maybe that's something that we consider in terms of helping to slow the traffic through there. I used to drive through that intersection all the time, and I do know that often people are not as mindful as they should be in a busy place. Having said that, and having listened to Dan's concern, I don't think that this is what's going to make or break that. I do view this as quite ancillary to the million and one reasons that people have for going to Needham General Store. And from that perspective, I believe that I'm supportive of this. The other question that I did have, just so that we're all clear, and we know there was a question that came up from Elizabeth that related to notice. I think it's worthwhile just to clarify what we do for notice again, so that we can understand that.
Thank you. Sandy, why don't you help with that notice question?
Certainly. Whenever a business applies for a liquor license, it's standard that we notify 300 feet from the establishment, 300 feet abutters all around. And then we go to 500 feet for any houses of worship, educational facilities, or hospitals. And we get the list and we provide labels and an instructive letter to the applicants so that they can do a mailing with notification as to the public hearing, a floor plan of what the business is going to look like, and instructions on how to submit any concerns.
As well as notice in the paper.
That's correct.
I will also add that we added it, we put up the sign on our door just so people could see if anyone had any concerns.
It's appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that.
Any further comment? Dan?
Yeah, a question for Sandy.
Yes, Dan.
Those are certified, yes?
Yes, they are return receipt, and I did receive them back.
You did get the okay, because we don't have those in the packet, but if you say they're there, that's fine with me.
They're in my folder, and I wanted to let you know that I did check for the handlers that spoke earlier, and they were not on either list as abutters.
Okay, that's because of distance?
Correct.
Thank you. Marcus, any comment or question?
Yes, I just appreciate you all being here and for your presentation. And I think, with that being said, the general store has been definitely a boost in morale, and it's been something that community that has had a lot of positive traction and response from this town and what you've been able to do, especially through the pandemic. So it's been much appreciated. And I kind of second what Mary Ann said about, using the barrel possibly to help, kind of slow down the traffic in addition to having that light. And I think just listening to you all and your commitment, and it seems like, Needham is a place that you are proud to be, working in, and the community enjoys your presence and what you bring to our table. And that is appreciated.
Thank you, Marcus. And I will second that. I think you've been a terrific business and real entrepreneurial in how you've transformed that business to really what the customer needs, and welcoming in local artisans. And I think this would just be another step of local products and craft products that would serve your customer base. And I understand the traffic concerns, but again, I see it as ancillary and something that would be a nice amenity. But if we look at ways that I know in other liquor stores we've had, and I'm talking about stores now, issues with trash that we've had to address. And of course, just going forward, if that's something that you look at, and I know you will, as being a good neighbor. So any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion?
I'm looking for the motion, just one second.
Right.
So I would move that the select board approve the application for a wine and malt retail package store license under the town of Needham rules and regulations applicable to package stores for the Needham General Store. Michael Kozalakis, manager. If approved, vote to forward the approved alcohol license application to the ABCC for its review and final approval.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Is there a second on that?
A second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, just to say, I don't question the ability or the hard work of the applicants in any way. It all has to do with the location, and it isn't even about the people in the neighborhood or the general citizenry. It's just that I've seen a lot of people use bad judgment in the past at that intersection at certain times of day. I hope that I'm mistaken about the hazard. But, you know, I've said how I feel about it. I think it's too high a risk based on my own understanding. And also the second, I don't know if the Peskies were on the call before the hearing began, but I spoke a little bit about, for myself, I'm not willing to let any of our remaining licenses out of the barn until we resolve the question of how we're going to get more for what we expect are going to be a number of new businesses coming in to seek to compete for them. So I'll be voting no, but I wish I think the applicants seem like great people to me. I know they work hard, and assuming that I'm outvoted, I wish them all the best.
Thank you, Dan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we come to the vote. Marcus,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Dan,
No.
and the chair votes yes. That's 3-1. Congratulations. And from all of us, as you heard, we wish you great success on this endeavor. And thanks for being a great neighbor.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Mr.
Thank-
Chairman, I'd like to move the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? I'm just waiting. Marcus is off screen. Okay. So we have a motion and a second to move the consent. Any discussion? Hearing none, we come to the vote. Mary Ann,
Aye.
Dan,
Yes.
Marcus,
Yes.
chair votes yes. That's unanimous. Thank you, Mary Ann. Okay. Everyone has cleared the hall, it looks like, so we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, Arbor Day Proclamation. Mr. Olson, Superintendents of Parks and Forestry. Harris Lustig.
I'm smiling. I'm having, his name is jumping all over my screen. I'm having a hard time bringing him in. Sorry.
DPW Director, Karis Lustig, and
Hopefully it's him.
that looks like him. There it is. Ed, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board, and good evening. As you saw in your select board agenda packet, I'm here tonight on a special occasion. Once a year, I get to join you all to do the Arbor Day Proclamation. And I'm looking for a positive motion in favor to accept this and sign that motion to make this Friday celebrated and recognized as the National Arbor Day in Needham. And with that said, if I could take a moment, I just wanted to thank some people for some celebrations we've already had in town, as some of you may have seen through social media, but we had a celebration last Monday with Dina Mareshi, and I'm terrible with names. I like to say Dina Papetti because that's easier for me to pronunciate, but Dina and her girls for the Needham Soccer Club. And Dina is the Community Liaison Director. And I think that's just wonderful that Soccer Club has that position. And Dina is really, really great at it. She's a role model. She's been working with us behind the scenes for the past couple of years, instilling pride in her girls' teams and in volunteerism, which is really something that I think we need more of for the young folks today. So thank you to Dina, to the Soccer Club for that. Last Monday, we planted 5 trees at Memorial Park, which we'll all see this weekend for town meeting. And just really proud of the girls in their efforts. So thank you to them. Yesterday, of course, we had our second Arbor Day celebration with a neighborhood celebration that was at Riverside Park. And I want to thank Janice Epstein, Robert Deutsch, Diane Abbott, everybody really in the neighborhood that made that day special. I've spent a lot of time with the neighborhood over there over the past few years. This past winter, we unfortunately had to take down 7 large oaks that had shown signs of decay and rot, and we craned those out. And as we say, as a board and as we meet, we always try to place 2 trees for every 1 tree removed. So we removed 7 trees. We planted 15 trees yesterday. We had sponsors from Eversource Electric. We had sponsors from ACRT, ACI, Hartney Graymont. The neighborhood actually splurged and got us Frank Pepe's for lunch, which I'd never had Frank Pepe's, but just unbelievable. So really great fun, good day. please go by the park. A lot of people forget about Riverside Park, where it is and what it is, but it's a great neighborhood park. Of course, Nina Prohadsky, 88 years young, is really the keeper of the neighborhood there. So Nita's doing well, I'm proud to say. And we have a couple more celebrations. The week isn't over. So Mitchell School is this Friday to celebrate with the second graders, plant 5 trees with the staff and the kids there. So we're excited about that. And then we're going to be handing out seedlings throughout the day at RRC. So we have over almost 300 seedlings to hand out, 7 different varieties of trees. And lastly, I just wanted to say I can't do it all without my staff. Really, Mike and Doug were instrumental. Both my foreman with Dina's group last week. I had slipped a disc in my back, so I was kind of laid up, but they took the ball and ran with that. And of course, Kevin and Mike, Kevin Naughton, my assistant, and Brad Bottomley. Brad is 70 years young, and he will be retiring this Friday, Arbor Day. But Brad has been really instrumental in teaching me a lot of what I know, and how I became a certified arborist was really learning and listening to Brad. So we're gonna miss him, and we wish him the best. And thank you all for having me tonight.
Ed, thank you for that, and thank you for all, shouting out to all those people who actually help with this community and the cleanup and volunteering at that park, which was a hidden gem until tonight. But I think it's terrific. It's a great place to go to. And thanks for all your help, as you have the parks to deal with. And of course, the trees is why we're here tonight. So thank you for all your leadership, and you have a terrific team. And before we go to the proclamation, which I would ask, sorry to put you on the spot, Ms. Cooley, as vice chair, to read, but are there any questions for Mr. Olson or comments? Ms. Cooley.
I just want to echo the thanks, and I want to echo thanks for Ed's outreach to all the groups to work with him and to participate. And I am really glad to see Eversource in our community planting trees instead of chopping them down. And I do in fact hope that in addition to Eversource, that all those who clear cut lots might learn to appreciate their trees some more too. So I'll just put in a plug. The trees are good. We like them. And I do hope we stay and remain a tree city, and thank you for your helping to keep us there.
Dan.
Yeah, I'm going to get slightly off topic first, but you're here and you're working on a number of things for town meeting, including the presentation on the new layout and design for the town common. I had an inquiry from a town meeting member today asking for information about it. I pointed that town meeting member to the information that is posted on the web, which I think is substantial. But I said, if you had more questions, to email in. I don't know if you had any comment or if people were satisfied, but I just wanted you to know that might be out there. And I thank you for your work on that. And also the trees are a great part of the town, and all the work that you do on them and to promote these initiatives, and it's not there. And it's easy to say we like trees. It turns out that things like taking care of them, deciding what you have to do to manage, and how to accommodate the built environment that we work in, and all the different things that people want to do, and so on, and still make sure that we're planning for the future and taking care of our environment. It's a lot of work. You do a great job, and I want to say thanks to you, to Karis and the staff for everything around this.
Great. Thank you. Any other further discussion? Okay, hearing none, Ms. Cooley, is there a proclamation you wish to read?
I've been warming up on my whereases. Whereas in the year 1646, in the then town of Boston of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, the first recorded public tree planting in the New World took place as a community effort involving men, women, and children. And whereas the planting was not accomplished for private gain or individual benefit, but rather it was public in nature for the relief of travelers, because trees had long been recognized as providing tremendous benefits to the well-being of mankind. And whereas when Needham became the 88th incorporated community in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in 1711, its inhabitants were mostly land-hungry settlers from Boston who had come to the wilderness to farm on the open land of the Great Plain. And whereas the lessons of the settlers had been learned, the practice of tree planting had continued on the plain to reduce the erosion of the precious topsoil by wind and water. And whereas trees are one of our greatest resources, they provide food and shelter, moderate temperatures, reduce noise pollution, provide windbreaks, and establish a habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees in our town of Needham help beautify the area by providing summer and fall colors, interesting sizes and shapes, beautiful flowers and fruit, and increased property value. And whereas the town of Needham wishes to be recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and desires to continue its tree planting ways. Now therefore, we, the Select Board of the town of Needham, do hereby proclaim the last Friday in April as Arbor Day in the town of Needham, and we encourage our residents to support all efforts to protect our trees and woodlands for future generations to come.
Well done. And that's offered as a motion, Ms. Cooley?
It is so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we come to the vote. Marcus,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you again, Ed. Thank you, Karis. Looking forward to seeing you around.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, as everyone clears a Zoom, we come to the next item on the agenda, Highway Commercial 1. Discussion with the planning board as well as planning consulting assistance warrant article, which will follow that. Oh, Sandy, I see it would be,
Sandy, maybe you could ask people to raise their hand if they're.
I'm gonna grab
Second,
Jean McKnight. I know that it's Jean McKnight, and
yes, and Adam Block.
some reason people are jumping all over my screen. I just, I apologize for my delay here.
I see.
It
Adam
happened to
Block.
me earlier today too. Don't worry,
Don't worry
Sandy, it's
about
not
that.
just you.
So Adam, Jean, Paul, and Lee, please.
Okay. Let me go over
And Marty,
this again. Oh, I know. They all raised their hands,
yes.
and that's why they're not alphabetically. We have Adam Block as well. Okay, so here we go. Promote. Thank you. Everyone's going to get real small. Joni Shockett?
No.
Okay.
And this is not a public discussion tonight. This is a board discussion for those in attendance. And then we're waiting on Lee.
I think I brought Lee in.
Okay,
Yeah, there she is. Thank you.
Good
great.
evening,
Okay, Jean, I'll open the floor for you. Yes.
members of the Select Board and Ms. Fitzpatrick, Ms. Sincata, Mr. Davidson, Ms. King, and here we are. I'm, of course, Jean McKnight, Chair of the Planning Board, and this is a posted Planning Board meeting. So I'll quickly call the roll of the Planning Board members who are here. Adam Block.
Here.
Paul Alpert.
Here.
Martin Jacobs.
Here.
Thank you. So we have a quorum of 4 members of the Planning Board here. And our Planning Director, Lee Newman, is also with us. So we've been asked to appear for 2 matters that are on the warrant for our upcoming annual and special town meetings.
Right.
One is the.
If I may, I'm sorry to interrupt, Jean. I just to set the table a bit. And yes, the
Yes, of
first one is
course.
talking about, we're going to talk about the Highway Commercial 1, and I'd like to focus on that, and then we can jump to the planning consulting assistance. And it's very dense, the materials that we've had. This has been ongoing discussion. And instead of going over all that, in detail, I would just like if the board could update us. And I know it's in our packet, it's been updated from the prior town meeting to today, what has changed, and then just give us a brief presentation of what you're looking for in the reason for this request.
Yes, well, to start with the Highway Commercial 1, I'm going to ask our board member, Adam Block, to lead that presentation. I mean, he's been taking the lead on this project, serving on the working committee that was had with Select Board member Marion Cooley. Mr. Block.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Select Board. Congratulations, Marcus. Mr. Chair, I have some remarks that I've prepared. I also would like to share my screen if I may.
Right.
And that way I can deliver a bit of this presentation, which should include a number of the comments that you outlined in your framework.
You should be free to share your screen.
All right. So bear with me one moment. I'm trying to extend this to the view. I can't really see the screen that you see, but can you see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yes, that's better. That's perfect.
Good, perfect. So the purpose of the Highway Commercial 1 zoning change is really threefold. First, to improve our gateway into town. Second, to enhance public control over development that will actually minimize the impact around the neighborhood and throughout town. And also 3, to unlock the area's economic potential, which I'll speak to momentarily. The process of rezoning this area began over 7 years ago in 2013, when the CEA began studying ways to update the industrial districts after the town successfully rezoned the New England Business Center. And this proposal has changed substantially throughout this process that included more than 45 public meetings, and I'll come to those changes momentarily. Since 2019, the Planning Board has made the following 13 meaningful changes. First, we changed the use table. You can see there are 3, I've outlined these changes by category as to use, height, density, the setback, and open space. So I'll just quickly run through these. We changed the use table by adding 240 units of multifamily housing that includes a minimum of 12.5% of affordable housing units. That's a new change since 2019. We reduced the size of retail use by right from 10,000 square feet by right to 5,750 square feet by right, and by special permit from 25,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet, to eliminate what would otherwise become destination retail uses. And so this is really making ancillary use out of retail for occupants and nearby residents as a convenience. We also eliminated outdated and undesirable uses such as intense manufacturing and distribution warehouses. We made 5 changes under the height requirements. Specifically, within 200 feet from Gould and Highland, we reduced the maximum height from 48 feet to 42 feet. We also reduced the height by right to 2.5 stories and the height by special permit to 3 stories. And again, this was under within 200 feet of Gould and Highland. Beyond 200 feet from Gould and Highland, where the topography drops and slopes towards 128, we made the following changes. We reduced the height by right from 5 stories to 4 stories. We reduced the height by special permit from 6 stories to 5 stories, so that a 5-story building appears as a 4-story building if you're on Gould, and as well, if you're looking at a 4-story building, it would appear as a 3-story building if you're on Gould Street. We made 3 major adjustments to the density to floor area ratio. We reduced the special permit floor area ratio from 1.75 to 1.35. We reduced the by right floor area ratio from 1.0 to 0.7. And we also eliminated a waiver that we had otherwise included in the 2019 proposal And that way, and we eliminated the waiver that would otherwise enable an additional 25% of floor area ratio. So those are the three changes we made to the density. We did also increase the setback along Highland and Gould from 20 feet to 50 feet. That would be a landscape buffer. And in addition to that, we increased the open space requirement from 20% to 25%. Here you see the use table that we've been using to compare the uses allowed by right and the uses allowed by special permit under the existing bylaw, our 2019 proposal, and of course the current 2021 proposal. I've identified a number of the changes where we've eliminated the outdated and undesirable uses in the red text under the existing bylaw, and yet we preserved and carried forward a number of remaining and relevant uses, including athletic facilities, offices, research and development, some retail, as well as restaurants. And then also new for the current proposal since 2019 is the multifamily housing requirement that we've included here. We've also included the dimensional requirements, and I've spoken already to a number of those changes that have already been made, and yet we're happy and available to discuss any of the details here, and yet here is the dimensional requirements. Our second goal for rezoning this area is to enhance public control over development. If a developer proceeds with a by right use and dimensional requirement, the town is very limited in its authority to alter development and has no authority, no leverage to deny development. We're looking to instead induce development through the special permit process, which is a public process that bestows upon the planning board discretionary powers to either substantially alter or simply deny development. It represents the maximum leverage a town may impose in addition to having a developer pay for any mitigation required. If we wait for a developer to present zoning to us, we may miss the market and end up negotiating against ourselves. Why? Because they're setting the standards to their own benefit and not necessarily to the town's benefit. If we adopt Articles 5 and 6 at town meeting, we are setting the zoning framework now. And then we're not beholden to developers demanding yet additional relief and are able to negotiate town benefits from a position of strength instead of from a position of weakness. We've also conducted a traffic impact study, which was developed based upon a maximum build-out condition of the proposed zoning. It used annual growth rate that was 10 times the actual growth rate, and also used higher traffic counts from 2015 as condoned by Mass DOT. And the results found that our roadways can indeed handle an increase in volume from this development, as well as development from up the street at Northlands project across the river. At maximum build-out conditions, taking would be required on the site of development itself to widen a section of Gould to accommodate on-site and neighborhood traffic. An easement from Wingate for an additional traffic signal at a site driveway may also be necessary. The left turn from Hunting on to Highland post-build remains at such low volume that taking on Hunting is not in fact recommended or required, that there is capacity for storage along Hunting. The town, of course, will exercise its full authority to ensure that traffic returns to pre-build or better conditions after development. This is a critical factor that the planning board considers as part of any public approval process for a special permit. I can now speak momentarily to the fiscal impact based on 7 scenarios that you see in front of us. Here I've outlined under the existing zoning, that the current use generates roughly $500,000 in revenue to the town. Under a warehouse use, if a distribution warehouse was here, there would be net revenue of roughly $750,000 to the town per year. And if there was a lab or R&D facility with some retail at maximum build out under the existing bylaw, the development would generate roughly $2.5 million per year. You can see that under the existing proposal, by right, we can generate between 3.2 million with housing and $4.5 million per year to town with no housing. Obviously, the difference is that with housing, the demand on municipal services is much greater than without housing. By special permit, you can see that with housing, development could generate over $6 million per year and $8.3 million with no housing per year. And we believe that development would generate net revenues of somewhere between $60 and $70 million over 10 years to offset the residential tax burden. And I'd also like to point out that we believe this development could create hundreds of high-paying jobs in town. We believe this is the best proposal to achieve our primary goal of improving the gateway. It gives the town maximum control over development while unlocking substantial benefits now before the market gets ahead of us. This is our proposal for town meeting, and we are asking for your affirmative support for Articles 5 and 6. Article 6 is a map change and Article 5 is the main zoning change. So I can leave the shared screen up, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sorry, before we do, Ms. Cooley, would you like to comment on this, or do you want to wait until we have further discussion? I know you've worked very hard on this as well as a member of our.
Probably wait until we have further discussion, and I'd probably just as soon say if we can move the presentation down so we can
That's
see
what I was
everybody. I think for discussion, it's better.
Yep, so let's take that away. And thank you, Mr. Block, for that presentation. Really gives us a background and how it shifted from the prior iteration, which I know myself I had concerns with the size and the scope at the time. But I'd like to hear from other people on this board. Questions or comments? Marcus.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Madam Chair and everyone else on the Planning Board Committee, I appreciate you being here. And I just had a few questions. Can you hear me okay? I know my sound's been a little off. So if it sounds like I'm yelling, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. When I looked down on, when it talked about affordable housing, as far as affordable, in that sense, what do you mean? As far as is it market or subsidized, or what would that look like?
It looks like 12.5% of whatever housing units are produced at the site would be a percentage of the area median income, which is at 80%.
And then, can I ask another one? Is that all right?
Absolutely, Marcus. Yep, the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So when you say high-paying jobs, like what does that constitute in, I guess, how that information was gathered, and what is that, what do you feel like would be equate, I guess, to a high-paying job, and for whom?
So I think those are great questions. If we anticipate that there would be predominantly the use of office or research and development. And research and development typically employs high-paying jobs. There are multiple people that are in marketing. There are executives that there are in leadership, management that are managing the whole food chain of product development. It could also be IT. It could be software engineering. It could be other forms of computer engineering. It could be an internet-based company, and those types of businesses typically have salaries that are on the higher end, as opposed to, for instance, the service industry or other industrial uses that are currently at the site.
Did anyone else, or do you want me to? Oh, okay, I wrote down a few because obviously I want to learn.
This is great.
As much as, all right. And then my first select board meeting, which was the 14th, I believe, the finance committee had a meeting around the same time. And with them, I guess, unanimously voting against the proposal from the lens of the planning board, why do you feel like that might have happened? And has anything been done since that vote to kind of change or alter this proposal at all?
I appreciate the question. So senior members of the finance committee certainly recognized the substantial fiscal impact that this would have on a net basis, the strong contribution that development would contribute to the town. They had their reasons to oppose it, which is obviously their independent prerogative, as much as we would have preferred them to vote in support of it. However, we still continue to believe that this is the strongest, best proposal that balances our ability to improve the gateway, to ensure that development would happen under our control as opposed to under a developer's control. And it still generates both substantial financial benefit to the town, in addition to creating significant jobs.
Next question, if nobody else has any, I guess I'll keep asking, because why not? As far as, being in the community and listening to the community a lot, especially over the past few months, I think one of the things that has been discussed is whether it's a warehouse, which is not going to happen, but Amazon delivery stations or things like that. So as far as the 1.35, if it's reduced to 1 or something lower than that, does that take away that ability to have something like that there, or does that not change that?
So the restriction on a warehouse would come about through this zoning change, because this zoning change changes the use table. It's nothing to do with the size. So
okay.
It's only a function of use. And distribution warehouses in particular would be prohibited. They would not be allowed, regardless of whatever size that they wanted to achieve. But I will say that, for the record, that just so you're aware, that reading real estate trades as I do professionally, but also as and through the Boston Globe, we do know, as a matter of fact, that these online retailers have moved and changed their distribution strategy to a suburban market between 150 and 250,000 square feet, which has supply trucks, large supply trucks, 18-wheelers at this site that would be coming along 128, the Pike, and Route 9. That's the supply side to fill up the shelves. And then when they're running through town, they're not running through the highways. They've got smaller trucks. They're still, in some cases, 12-wheeler trucks, and some maybe even a little smaller, but they're running through local roads, Central Avenue, Highland, and other roads as major arteries, because that's the delivery side, and they're running through Needham to get into Natick. They're running through Needham to get into Newton as well, and other towns.
So the warehouse is out of the picture. So if they label it a delivery station or something different, does that change what it can be, or does that not do anything for that?
It would still change. It would still be prohibited use.
Okay. All right. And then looking at the net revenues, especially for the buy special permit, the $6 to possibly $8.3 million. So has there been a kind of analysis between if we kept it, say, at the 1.35, or how much less money do you think we'd make if we dropped it to a little bit lower, just hypothetically? And then would that really affect the hundreds underpaying high jobs, hundreds of high jobs? Or have we looked at that, or 1.35 is kind of where we are and we haven't looked at anything less to see, you know, if we don't get to the 6 or the 8 million, you know, if we had something a little bit less than that, or how would that work?
So
If I may, Adam, can you just, on that question, how did you come up with that 1.35 number as the top limit?
So the purpose, there was a working committee that included members of the select board, planning board, and the finance committee, and directed the fiscal impact study, the terms of that fiscal impact study, which under ordinary development practice is to look at what the, you know, what we're looking at by right and by special permit FAR. So that sets the parameters. The lowest parameter is by right. And that's one condition. And then another condition is by special permit, which is the maximum condition. So the fiscal impact study looks within that range. So by right, for instance, is a 0.7 and special permit is 1.35.
I think what Matt was asking, I'm not sure, is like, what got you to 1.35 and not something lower than that as far as by special permit? Or I think that's what I was trying to get at.
So I guess the answer to that is we previously had in 2019 a special permit floor area ratio of 1.75, and that was regarded. We had a strong community feedback, constructive feedback that said that that was too large for that area given its proximity to the residential neighborhood. And yet we're still looking to incentivize some development. Now, previously we had a by right floor area ratio of 1.0 up until earlier this year. So we were between 1.35 and 1.0 by right, and 1.35 based on some early development sketches from 2019 suggested that the scale of 1.75 was too great, and yet we would still need to incentivize some type of development, and achieved 1.35 as a special permit figure.
And Adam, would it be fair to say that when you came up with the 1.35, you then looked at traffic, et cetera, impact, and that works at the maximum 1.35 as far as you're concerned?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you.
And then as far as Mr.
No, it's okay, Marcus, go ahead.
Okay, as far as if we were to, to have the 3.2 to 4.5 or the 6 to 8.3 million, if we're to get that net revenue, what is the plan for how it would be used as far as within the town, and what happens from there? Do you know what I mean? Like, what would that plan be, or what potentially?
That would be a discussion for our board to find out how that revenue is used, and that would be a nice problem to have. But that would come back to our board as far as a discussion.
We'd like to generate it and allow you guys to spend it.
Great. Anything further, Marcus? Oh, yep, absolutely.
Yep, one more. I know you mentioned for the last public comments you had is why you went from the 1.75 to the 1.35. So after that, you went down to that. From that point on, as far as going back to the public for comments and concerns and things like that, again, how was it received from the public as far as where we stand now? And your thoughts of kind of where we are now, as far as the public eye and what you've heard and feedback that you've all received with the proposed plan.
So just to clarify the record, it was not 4.75. I think it was 1.75, just for clarity.
Oh, did I say 4 point? I thought I said 1.75. I'm sorry. My sound.
No problem. It's a lot to get up on, and there's a lot in the details. So we reduced it to 1.35. We've had some of the feedback, members of the public suggested that they would support higher density, in fact, and we've also received feedback. We're aware of the citizens petition that I'm sure you're aware of, that has advocated for yet further reduction in floor area ratio. So we've received comments across the spectrum.
Great.
May I respond
Dan, yeah,
also,
yes.
Marcus, to your question? We heard from many residents that they wanted to see a 50-foot landscape setback. Their vision of this gateway of Needham is that it would be a landscaped area. Now, the current auto dealership use has a landscape park at the corner, and currently the zoning does call for a 50-foot landscape setback. It hasn't fully been carried out because the current use is prior non-conforming. But any future development, that entire 50-foot strip along Highland and along Gould would be trees, bushes, grass, flowers. And that changed because we were originally proposing 20 feet, which is a typical kind of setback that we have in other of our business districts. But that's what people wanted, so we thought yes. And then also, once you get beyond the 50-foot, between the 50-foot and the 200-foot is where you have the low-rise development. And we had proposed that that could be as high as 54 feet, remember correctly? And we brought that down. So it's only going to be 2.5 stories, 48 feet, and even that's by special permit. So we did listen very much to what people had to say and made those changes in response to those comments.
Thank you. Dan?
Sure. I just wanted to kind of speak to a couple of things that Marcus had spoken about to kind of frame it a little bit as I understand it. The first is about the 1.35 maximum under the special permit process for the FAR, which is the ratio of total building to total land area. And it gets to be over 1 because the buildings will be taller than 1 story. Even though there'll be a lot of open space. The 1.35 is the maximum that a developer ultimately can apply for in this space. When they come in, the planning board doesn't have to allow the full 1.35, and there may be some pushback. Now, I think in all fairness and likelihood, the developer is always going to come in and is going to be aiming very close to the 1.35, and the ultimate is likely to be not far below that because it's kind of in the nature of the process, unless there's something about it that really causes the planning board to say, no, well, you can't have the maximum. This is too different from what we were thinking about. You can't have the maximum. But so you kind of say, what is the maximum that we could allow under a theoretical situation? And that's the reason why for the 1.35 being higher than some lower number. Second has to do with the revenues. It's all in this kind of, there's 2 kinds of zoning. You can be zoning with a project-based development, which we've done in some instances here in town, most recently the Carter, and we have the new hospital going up in Needham Crossing, where you really know exactly the building, you know what's going to be in it, you know the tax revenues. When you're doing this of arranging an envelope, it's more of a visioning process, and the estimates are a little broader and not as hard. Now, the town has done this kind of zoning before. In fact, that's what the underlying zoning in Needham Crossing on the other side of the highway is based on. And in fact, we've done really well, but you don't have it, the numbers aren't as hard. So even the 8 million is a little play in it one way or the other. And then just the question about the revenues, because it ties back to some of there has been a lot of argument about this, as everybody in the room and everybody watching in the audience knows. From the point of view of somebody on this board, it's a balance. Having good commercial development is important for the town because it's good for the economy, and it even provides employment for people who work here locally as well as commuters, and our commuters go other places with related businesses. But it always has impacts on the neighborhood. So you need to try to balance that off. And you need to try to maximize in a reasonable way your revenues, because what those revenues do is support the total operations of town government. And those needs, the raw question of who gets to decide how to do that, that's where you'll be hearing from the town manager. Her job is to get the input from this board, from all the departments, from the school department, and try to figure out how we're going to pay for everything that people legitimately want with a number of dollars that we have. And when you look at your warrant and you see the things that are pulled out, the Emory School, the Emory Grover building, the fact that we've pulled out a number of things that we'd like to spend to do work up at Ridge Hill, the fact that we know it's not in the warrant at all. It's $300 million of school construction that has been an identified need by the school committee. It's not in there because there's no cash flow to support that. So the question is there some way that we get to plan this that's fair to everybody, that's reasonable in terms of traffic and density, that generates those revenues that are not just a pile of cash that we get to put in a bucket at town hall? This is what pays for things that people want around here. So that you're really asking the question that goes right to the central issue of this. And I hope we're able to get to a good outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will just comment, I'd be remiss without mentioning the Finance Committee. It is their operating budget. And of course, they would be dealing with that on the operations side as we'd be dealing with the capital side.
They never get forgotten, especially when they're
right. But I wanted to put it right out there because that's how it's going to go. I do just want to comment, and I know Mary Ann had a comment, but as far as, and Dan, you were talking about the max FAR, and you're looking at that number, and there's a difference, people get scared by that number if it gets too big, but there's a difference to me if that's made up of laboratory space, which might have a low traffic, low amount of employees impact, or versus another space that would generate a lot of traffic and have a lot of employees. And I think that's why the special permit process is so imperative, because the planning board can look at that and say, okay, well, that FAR is high, but the impact is low, versus that FAR is low, but that impact might be high. So there's going to be discretion with the planning board. And I think the public process is really when it comes down to this application in a special permit process. And as a special permit, I'm assuming that someone may ask us even to weigh in because it's just the gateway. So I think that the second portion of this is really where the rubber will meet the road to see if there's a project that's going to come into play and how we can make sure that it doesn't impact the neighborhood, but also generates the revenues that we're looking at. So to me, the key is that special permit, and FAR buildings can consist of many different things that will impact the FAR. So I know there's been a lot of focus on that, but we just have to keep in mind that the use is also going to drive the impact to the site. Mary Ann? And then
So I
Mark.
think there's a number of things to keep in perspective. And I just wanted to go back historically, maybe a little bit farther. When this proposal came in 2019, in October of 2019, it came at an FAR of 1.75. Why was 1.75 the number used? 1.75 is the FAR that is used over in Needham Crossing. So the initial number came from Needham Crossing. I think it's important to actually look at Needham Crossing and see what our experience is, because while we plan for maximums, the reality is often different from that. And we don't know what the reality is until we get an actual project. But if we look at Needham Crossing and understand what occurred there, the answer is that at the portion of Needham Crossing that has TripAdvisor and the pediatric hospital from Boston Children's, the approved FAR there is 1.39, just so that people have some context. And similarly, if we look at the section of the site that includes Sharp Ninja and NBCU, the approved FAR there is 0.56. Now, all of that is in an area that has a design maximum FAR, right, of 1.75. So there is, in fact, a lot of discretion that's going on as builders look at something or developers look at something and consider the site and what they want to bring. Our real goal is to set a cap that then people can work against. And I don't think we expect anybody to be coming in, right up against the line there as we go forward. So just historically, that's a little bit of context. But what we clearly heard in 2019 was that people wanted a reduction. And the 1.35, based on the feedback that we had from developers at the time, sort of set a cap at the 1.35 as being a maximum. And then, as I think was said, based on that, we look at that maximum and we look at the worst case traffic, and everybody hears that, even though the different uses that had been proposed had different peak hours, they threw all of them in the same peak hour and then grew them by all the years. So when the traffic engineer said that she had yet to see a site ever approach the traffic that was outlined in a study like this, I believe that to be true based on our experience as well. So that's something to consider. The other thing, Marcus asked about the FinCom and their perspective on this. I think if you listen to the FinCom comments, there were some comments that related to the fact that they would have liked to see fiscal impact of the scale that they saw for TripAdvisor and NBCU. And of course, TripAdvisor and NBCU were specific projects. And at some point, presumably, if we rezone, and hopefully not before we rezone, okay, we will have the opportunity, and they will have the opportunity to review a specific fiscal impact study for a project, because when there is a real project, it will have to go through this whole process in public engagement. And our goal actually would be that it's most desirable for that to happen under a special permit, because it does give us the greatest control. I think Dan's point was really important to recognize. I had a discussion with Mr. Davison to understand what the cost of the debt would be for the $330 million school building plan that we've looked at as the master plan. So currently the town has a debt load of $21 million annually. Incidentally, the debt load to carry $330 million would be another $21 million annually. Now, clearly, all of us understand we cannot afford to double the town's debt load. That would not work for our taxpayers. It will not work for us, which is why the town will be engaging in a process this summer to talk about what these building projects will have to look at like so that we can afford them. But from the select board's perspective, we do think about what tools do we have to be able to afford what the community has told us they want. All right, and that they need. And the answer is schools are highly important to the Needham community. We expect those schools to be top notch. And we all agree, as we look at the Mitchell School, at Pollard, at Emory Grover, that changes need to be made there and those facilities need to be upgraded. So that is a very serious question that's in front of the town. If we were to be able to generate $4 to $6 million a year out of this site, that would go a long way to helping the town be able to pay for these improvement projects that have been identified as so badly needed by the community. So those are all things that I think about as I'm looking at this proposal.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Marcus?
Thank you, Mary Ann. And then I think one of my last questions is if we get past this step and hypothetically it gets to town meeting, and if it doesn't go in the way where it's voted through, what would be the next step? Would we have to go back to that special permit or go back to lowering it even more? Is there like if then what kind of scenario? Are we back to the drawing board completely, or we just take a look at doing a little bit less, or what would be the process from your perspective of what would happen?
So the first thing that happens is if the zoning does not pass town meeting is nothing, in the sense that the existing zoning, the underlying zoning that already exists remains. There is no change. And so then it becomes a race. And the race is who's going to buy the property, or will the town undergo another process to revision zoning in that area? It's, you asked a question before about what, have I seen it, some of comments on social media, for instance, and sure I have. And, many have advocated that the town acquire the land and put in a recreational facility with an ice rink and maybe some pool tables and arcades and so on, in addition to several tracks and so on. And that's a choice that the town can make, but it certainly seems like a highly unlikely possibility. Just to give you a sense of perspective, I believe the Channel 5 building was acquired in 2020 at the time for $15 million. So,
Not in 2020. In which year?
I apologize. Thank you very much. In 2000. And so the appreciated value of that we can leave to an economist, but we know it's substantially higher than $15 million. And as Marianne was mentioning, at a time when the school has significant capital expenditures just on the school alone, in addition to other projects and services that the town provides, I'm not sure how likely it would be for the town to acquire the land. So it then again becomes this race of either there being enough interest in town to support another process, or does another entity buy the land beforehand and develop the land based on what's available by right. And just so you're aware, the value of suburban industrial land has enjoyed and has been enjoying the highest appreciated level entirely as a result of competition coming in from the number of online retailers and businesses looking for these distribution warehouses. But it could be just in fairness, Marcus, it could be another, Norwood style, car dealership. That's an allowed use by right, and they can use Gould Street and the other streets in the area as test drive roads. That's certainly very possible with multiple dealerships, whether it's a Tesla dealership or a Volkswagen dealership or an Audi dealership. All of that's on the table.
Thank you for that answer, Adam. And getting back to Mary Ann's point about fiscal analysis, which I think is so important, and we've done that even on the housing projects that come to us, and the finance committee's looked at them. We've looked at them as a proposal when a specific project's identified, and then we can weigh in. And again, that's why, to me, this special permit process is going to be so important if this passes, because we have to balance the needs of this revenue that we all want so desperately with the neighborhood concerns. And I think that is the time to do that. This just opens that door to allow that to happen and to potentially get revenue from the site that right now, I think the downside risk of a warehouse is too great. So I see in the future us balancing those needs if this passes and coming up with something that will give us the money that we need, and also put restrictions on it to make sure that the green space and the building size and everything else fits within the neighborhood. And lastly, I'll say the planning board you're charged with planning. And I think that's, you've listened to people in the past iteration, you've come with this one. And the original one I thought was too big with the high FAR and the grocery store that was large and the traffic impacts. And you heard my concerns voiced at that time. But I think since then, there's been a good faith effort to minimize this and move forward at town meeting where they're the ultimate arbiter of this decision. So from where I am, I'm satisfied. I think if this does go through, the next step, of course, will be if someone does come forward in that special permit process and how that's going to play out. Any further discussion on this? We're not going to vote this right now. We're going to vote this later when we go to our warrant recommendations. But yes, Paul.
I'll start with a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Will the select board be discussing the proposed amendments that have been brought to the planning board? Because if you are, I do have some comments on a couple of them, but if you're not going to be taking them up, I will hold my tongue.
Right, thank you. We're not going to be taking those up this evening. Once they're proposed and the moderator allows them, then on town meeting floor, we'll have a discussion and we'll comment on those at that time. Mr. Matthews.
Mr. Chairman, not to vary it at all. I mean, my preference from watching this whole thing, I've participated in enough town meeting long enough. I'm strongly of the opinion that we shouldn't be legislating, we shouldn't be writing zoning on town meeting floor. So my feeling is that we should be advocating for this without amendment, or recommending sending it back or defeating it, whatever. But so I'm aware of different amendments that are out there, but I'm not interested. I personally would not see supporting any of them. Although they all may make points that might come back to the planning board after the outcome, plus or minus, you know, win or lose at town meeting. And if there's some suggested further tweaks or adjustments or even substantial changes, those amendments can go through the whole process the way every other element is this is done. So I guess coming back, I agree. I just want to vote yes or no on these articles. But on the other hand, since we're not going to take that vote till a little later on, and Mr. Alpert is in the room now, and if he wants to talk to us a little about things that are in there in some of those amendments that he thinks might be helpful for us to know about, I guess I'd be happy to hear.
I guess because those amendments aren't before us, I really don't want to comment at this time, Mr. Matthews. I think it would be something that we're giving a preliminary opinion or discussion. But I agree with the idea that the planning board has come forward with this and spent who knows how long, years on this, and it's ripe for town meeting vote. And I think to have an amendment on the floor is not the way to best do business unless there are extraordinary circumstances. So I'd just like to leave it at that. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to go on to the next item, which is the planning assistance, planning consulting assistance, which I would just say off the bat, it would look like if that's something we support, it'd be very helpful in future projects such as this. But I won't give my opinion too far afield. So I would like to hear more about it. I just
Yes, and I'll present our reasons for wanting to have this appropriation of $60,000, which is under Article 12 of the special town meeting. Similarly, a couple of years ago, $45,000 was appropriated for these kinds of consulting planning studies. And they were really necessary to support our planning for this very project we were discussing tonight, the visioning for the Muzzy Channel 5 site. So looking into the future, these funds, of course, would be spent under the direction of the town manager. The funds would supply support to the planning department, enabling the planning director to engage professional services from time to time to support two of its functional areas. First, the regulatory functions of the planning department, which oversees permit granting for the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, and the conservation commission. And of course, we discussed the special permit process quite a bit tonight. And Mr. Barelli pointed out how important that is, and how in that context, we'll be looking for traffic studies and fiscal impact studies. Now, very often that cost of that is shared or borne by the developer, but as we go forward, there may be need for the town to itself engage a consultant. And of course, as you know, well, let me move on also to the land use and town planning initiatives of the planning department, as we have many areas that we very much want to study this year. We've kind of been stymied by COVID and inability to meet, inability to review plans in people's offices, but these are the areas that we want to study. I just want to make sure I said enough about the need to support our ongoing permitting process, because that is very important. But We want to review the goals of the 2009 Needham Center Plan and the steps completed to date to meet those goals, to determine if adjustments to the zoning for Needham Center and Chestnut Street are warranted. And we anticipate that this effort will include a workshop to present accomplishments to date and identify any constraints to development that were not anticipated in the 2009 plan. And on that plan envisioned a village concept calling for diverse multi-use districts combining residential, commercial, and civic uses in a compact area, and proposed zoning regulations that would encourage massing, that would define a street edge, serve as a backdrop to the streetscape. Now, some projects that carry out this vision have occurred over the past decade, but not as many projects, not as much change as we had hoped for. We have the housing, the mixed-use building that includes housing units at Dedham, at 50 Dedham Avenue. And we've had the expansion of the Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital, the new town public safety building, and recently a new mixed-use building at 1517 Oak Street. But most of the underdeveloped areas identified in this plan have yet to reach their full potential. And the purpose of this review will be to examine current impediments to redevelopment and make the warranted adjustments to our zoning and put them, as proposed zoning amendments to town meeting. Now, suggestions from the Needham 2025 plan that was recently issued by the Select Board will certainly be examined along with other identified constraints. And we anticipate that this planning effort will provide a framework for adjustments. It occurs to me that consulting services that advise on the economics of mixed-use development in a downtown environment would be very helpful to us, for example. We also want to review the land use and policy goals of the business district located between May Street and Rosemary Street along Highland Avenue. And that's the district that includes Bertucci's and Sudbury Farms. The land use and dimensional regulations for this district have not been updated in over 50 years. Prior to 1989, all the town's commercial districts were zoned under a single business district designation. But recognizing that each district had its own, particular characteristics, we've undertaken zoning initiatives over the years to have a more tailored regulatory framework for each area. Now, this led to the creation of the Needham Center Business District, that we just discussed with Chestnut Street Business, and then also Avery Square Business District. The Commercial 128 Business District, which has been mentioned, has contributed so much to our tax base. The Hillside Avenue Business District and the Neighborhood Business District, those small areas. And you were discussing that small area across from the Hersey Station tonight. And this strip along Highland Avenue between May and Rosemary is the only remaining business district in which has not been updated. So we really want to study that area. And we also want to review the land use and policy goals of the town's industrial districts. We have this, we have the Industrial 1, which is the Muzzy Channel 5 site, but we also have a general industrial districts. And particularly the industrial district on Hillside Avenue that connects with the Hillside Avenue Business District. And just see what's going on there. Does that need updated? I happen to live near there and I noticed so many for lease signs. Yes, am I taking too long, Dan?
Well, what I would say is you sure described a lot more than $60,000 worth of work so far. And I just want to tell you, it's good for you to give us the information about this stuff, but I think you're not going to get any argument from any corner of this screen. You're elected to do planning for this town. You're volunteers. Good consulting work is expensive. We've got a lot of stuff that even in our much less professionally engaged element of this as outsiders, supporters of the planning process, but not the bosses of it. We're looking at having good commercial development that generates revenue, that jobs, and works well with the adjacent neighborhoods. We're looking at trying to find ways to improve both market and subsidized housing in the town. The kind of work that it takes to do this the right way needs professional consultant. I'm terribly disappointed that the Finance Committee recommended against this, but I'm all for it. And I think that you should have the money to use within your own discretion in a reasonable amount each and every year to do the work that you were elected to do. And I'm glad that you're doing it. So if there's anything that you have to add, but I don't think you need to sell this to anybody on the screen.
I want the public to know. So thank you very much, Dan. There's just 3 more things I really
Sure.
want the public to
Go
know.
ahead, Ms. McKnight.
Study. And one is inclusionary housing. We've got scattered places where we have requirements for affordable units in a certain percentage, but we don't have that in every one of our zones. We just missed out. I mean, we approved a nice 8-unit building in the Hillside Avenue Business District. No affordable units. We don't have a requirement in that zone. We very much want to study that in the coming year. And also, people, we have our accessory dwelling units. We've had them in place for a couple of years. We want to take a look at that. See if we should loosen that up a little bit. Do we really need special permits to have a place for your own mother or father? Maybe we do that by right. So that's an area you want to study. Also, the last large house amendments we made, what effect have they actually had? I very much want to go back and take a look at that and just take a look at a whole year of new permits and compare them with a whole year of old permits. I'm going to take that on myself. I'm a volunteer. I'm not going to be paid, but just to add to all of the things we want to do. And thank you very much, Mr. Matthews, for your support and understanding of our work.
Thanks, Ms. McKnight, and thank you for that robust roadmap. And I think all those items are just terrifically stated, and something from Chestnut Street to housing to ADUs is something that we can all get behind, and looking at that a different way. And as Mr. Matthews was saying, things cost money to look at things, and we have to pay if we want to really try to delve deep into some of these things. And I support the planning that you're doing and support assistance for that planning as we grow as a community and change as a community with our uses in our different zones, and what we're going to allow, what we're not going to allow, taking parcels, putting them together. But right now, I think some of the issues is that people don't want to sell. So you still have small parcels. What can you do with those small parcels instead of waiting for parcels to all come together to fit into the puzzle? So a lot of work needs to be done, and I appreciate you doing the work and support the money for you to get someone to help you with this amount of work. Other members of this board? Ms. Cooley?
Thank you, Mr. Borelli. I just wanted to expand maybe a couple of things on Jean's list, which I know it was quite lengthy already. But a couple of things that I know that I'm carrying in my head that I know you're hoping to get back to include taking a look at the parking requirements that we require by right, which we actually think are greater than are required or that should be required in today's transportation environment. As we're thinking about where transportation fits, given climate change and given how people are trying to look at using more public transportation, how we encourage that. And I'm also thinking about consideration for sustainability and how we think about that. So there is so much work that I really look forward to the planning being done by the planning board, and feel that we should be supporting it. It's in all of our best interests.
Thank you. Any more comments? I see the time, we're coming up against the hour, but happy if Marcus, you have any comments or?
I just wanted to thank Ms. McKnight about with that presentation and everything that you just said. And it makes so much sense to make sure that we are able to, in my eyes, push this through. You made so many valid points of things that we need and we want to be able to do without spending money, and to do it for the reasons that you have laid before us. makes me it makes me happy. It makes me smile to know that, you know, so many things are being considered and in a just way, and I feel like it's only going to help our town in the direction that we're going. So yeah, there's no complaints from this side.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Nelson.
Mr. Nelson. That's terrific. And with that, I want to thank you and all the members of your board for those two presentations. And we'll be taking that up later this evening when it comes to our position on warrant articles. But thank you for clarifying many questions and for getting into depth on that presentation, Mr. Block. It was very helpful for us and for the viewing public. And I wish you good night.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, board. Thank you, staff.
All right, and as we clear the room, next we stick with another type of planning, a citizen's petition for zoning. Attorney Junta. Hi, George.
Hiya, good evening.
Good evening. So you're here before us on a citizen's petition, and just to refresh people and Marcus, as far as the prior submittal of this was going to be discussed, and then due to COVID, it was asked, and we appreciate your client's willingness to postpone this, and then had to postpone it again to this town meeting. So we have discussed this before, but I thought it'd be wise to bring you in and give us an update, and also for Mr. Nelson to hear what this proposal is. So with that, I turn it over to you, Attorney
Right.
General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board, for giving me the opportunity this evening to speak on behalf of my clients, Bruno and Linda DeFazio, who are the proponents behind this warrant article. They live at 176 Hunting Road. They're basically at the top of the properties in question. So as you may recall, and Marcus, by the way, congratulations, and this will be new to you. So this is a proposal with respect to 23 different properties that are located along Hunting Road and just a very, very top part of Greendale Ave. Basically, these 23 properties were developed and laid out at a time before they were put into the acre zone. So right now, all 23 properties are located in the SRA or acre zone, and they were required to have an acre of land and 150 feet of frontage. They also are required to, the houses are required to be set back 30 feet from the road. However, of these 23 lots, not a single one of them has the required acre of area, and only 4 of them have the required 150 feet of frontage. So basically, none of these lots conform at all. In addition, several of the existing houses do not comply with the 30-foot front yard setback requirement that applies in the SRA zone. So as a result, putting additions on and redeveloping or rebuilding the houses in this area has been a bit difficult for the owners, because they either were prohibited from doing what they wanted to do because of the restrictions of the zone, or if they were allowed, they had to go to the Board of Appeals. And in fact, several years ago, I represented one of the owners before the Board of Appeals who received the approval and was able to put an addition on their house. However, there's no reason why these lots, first off, should be in the acre zone any longer. And there's no reason why these owners should have to go to the Board of Appeals if they want to put an addition on, say, and incur the additional expense, time, effort, and, you know, in the event that they have a standing disagreement with a neighbor, the possibility that they don't get approval because of that. So we basically are asking to take these 23 properties and move them essentially from the acre zone into the 10,000 square foot zone, or SRB zoning district. Now, the other side of Hunting Road is all SRB district. And hopefully you've looked at the slides that were included in your packet. And there's one slide in particular towards the very end that you can really see these lots are really laid out and were developed much like the lots on the other side of the street. And it really, in some ways, boggles the mind why they are zoned acre to begin with. But it is my belief, based on speculation and hearsay, that there was a thought at one point to create a buffer zone between the SRB houses on the left side of Hunting, if you're traveling up, northward, between those houses and the highway on the first instance, and what was then the industrial center on the second instance. However, today, between the construction of the barrier along the highway and the transformation that has happened in the former industrial center, then the New England Business Center, and now Needham Crossing, there is not a strong policy reason to have these properties be so harshly zoned to be put in the acre zone, especially considering the hardship that falls on the various owners there. Now, if these lots were placed in the SRB zoning district, 5 of them would still remain non-conforming, but only mildly non-conforming. There's only one property that right now is substantially substandard, and that would remain substandard. So, it seems to be something that there is currently no good, strong policy reason from a planning perspective to keep these as zoned acre. And there is good reason to rezone them as 10,000 square feet. Both the planning board and the finance committee have voted to approve or recommend adoption of the warrant article, and I would respectfully ask that this board do the same.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Mr. Matthews.
Welcome back, George.
Thank you, Dan.
We had this, you were before us 2 years ago with the petition, and I appreciate the board had asked you to defer because of the COVID emergency and the need to reduce the warrant, to defer bringing this to us until a later time. And so that was very courteous of you and the petitioners. I did want to challenge you on one point that I don't know is exactly so. I don't know the actual facts because it even happened a lot before when I was a kid. But I think that it's probably, I don't dispute that the lots were laid out back in the day, but I'm not sure that they were developed before the acre zoning was put on the property. And if you're going to say that, I guess I would ask you to confirm that that's so. Because my understanding is, my anecdotal understanding is a lot of the houses were built later, but they were built on lots that were laid out. As you know, and I just had to be candid because you're here, I don't agree with doing this. And the background, I think I've bothered my colleagues with this many times, so I won't go at too great length. But the reason that this is acre zoned, as I understand it, is that back in the day, what is now Greendale Avenue and this stretch of Hunting Road was Route 128. And when the circumferential highway was built in the 1950s, it was built on a new layout, which in places cut across that. But in this stretch going all the way down basically to St. Bartholomew's, was at some distance of hundreds of yards, or in some cases less, but a significant distance between. There was space in between the two roadways, and the town at that time, our Puritan forefathers, and one of the things they actually got right, intentionally zoned as much of the land as they could for 1 acre, which was their simplest device to make sure that as much of it remained green space and undeveloped as possible, while still allowing the use of the property by the people who owned and lived there. Now, that whole green strip, actually, a lot of it is still there, although in many places, because there are things that have happened that have superseded the town's zoning, such as the affordable housing that's built at the Modera, the presence of the Good Shepherd Fellowship Church, and some other large developments, the other developments that are allowed as of right, notwithstanding the zoning, are in that space, but there's still a lot of green there. And even in this area, that's true. I did have one question I wanted to ask you, which is, if you, under your analysis, this is going to allow the development the redrawing of the lines of most of the lots in the district if the owners want to do that. How many new lots, and I assume that at least some new lots will be developed, how many does your analysis show can be drawn in this 360,000 square foot zone if the new zoning is approved?
All right, Dan, I will answer that question in just a minute. I'd actually like to make a comment about your comments before that. So in my research, it seems, and I can't speak to the area south of Cheney Street, but it seems to me, based on what I've been able to find, that this area that's in question, these 23 lots, were rezoned into the acre zone by the fall special town meeting in 1970. And at that point, I can't say for certain that all the houses were built, but I certainly know that several of the houses were built. And in fact, there's a plan of record that carved up a good chunk of this area in the 60s. So I do think that if not all of them, most of them probably were built, and you can just by driving down the vintage of the houses, they're pretty much that.
I do not know, but that's my understanding. Go ahead.
And I would also say, I think when it comes to the land south of Cheney Street, where there are large sections of undeveloped woodland, in fact, that probably should stay in the acre zone, which is why we specifically chose to limit this just to these 23 lots that are north of Cheney Street and not go any further and not include that swath going down, basically under the view that being wooded and sort of undisturbed should stay that way. And this section being developed, and as you'll find out in a minute when I give you my answer to your question, pretty much developed as it will probably be for quite some time. We felt it made sense to make the distinction to ask for the relief on these 23 lots. Now, as to your question, you have to really do a good analysis. You have to break these 23 lots into two clumps. The 12 lots that are sort of north of Kendrick, and then the 11 lots that are south of Kendrick, sandwiched between Kendrick and Cheney. If you do an analysis of the lots between Kendrick and Cheney, no matter how you slice it, basically you can't get any more lots than are there now, either because of area constraints or frontage constraints. You simply can't squeeze any additional lots in. So those 11 lots are locked in at 11 lots, even if they're rezoned as 10,000 square feet. With respect to the 12 lots north of Kendrick, there is the possibility for redevelopment. However, realistically, looking at the existing configuration of the lots and based on current and for the last 10, 20-year trends, I would expect over the next several years that you're probably not going to see more than 2 or 3 new lots sort of squeezed in, as it were. It is theoretically possible if somebody were to buy or acquire all 12 lots, they could certainly redevelop, but you are talking about, an estimated acquisition of between $10 to $15 million for that large, that large of a chunk. In my experience, having done real estate law for over 25 years now, I've not generally seen developers in Needham or any of the suburban towns come in and buy 12 lots at a price tag of $10 to $15 million and redevelop the whole chunk. Typically what you see is infill development where somebody might buy 2 lots or 3 lots because that's the only time the opportunities come up. And looking at it from that perspective, because most of these lots only have, even on the larger side, 100 feet of frontage, when you put 2 lots together, you don't have enough frontage to get a third lot. So you'd have to basically put together clumps of lots. Now that said, there are a couple here and there. I think there's two lot situations where if they got together, they could redivide their lines and get 1 additional lot. So that's why I say over the next several years, 10 years or so, it's possible that you see 2, maybe 3 lots, but I would say probably no more than 2.
And George, if I may, on the worst case scenario with the $10 to $15 million acquisition, what's the max lots that you've calculated?
So if somebody redid the entire block, and this is sort of a very rough, but you're probably talking about somewhere between 18 to 20 total lots.
Okay, so an additional set, what are there, 13? You said 13 lots?
There's 12, so there's 12 now, so you'd be basically additional 6 to 8.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Matthews.
I won't belabor it, but I appreciate this, George. The first is, if anything factual I've said is misstated, then I'm happy to stand corrected. But I do want to, again, from the very beginning, from my involvement on this board, we're not the planning board, but I've said, and the board previously said when you were here 2 years ago, if all you need is relief that you would have for setbacks and so on, without drawing the new, without being able to have the smaller lot size, this board would fully support that and would help and would be happy to help you in whatever resources we have with the planning board. And I'm sure that relief could be granted without changing it with an overlay or whatever, without taking these lots out of the acre zone. But I do believe that having the not adding extra houses to this area is a good idea. Keeping the number there is a good idea. As those of us that participated in the Modera litigation, when there was actually emerging science produced by the opponents, some of which was adopted by this board in pursuing appeals, that said there are environmental hazards associated with building housing near the highway that you should be trying to mitigate or minimize how close you're coming and how much you're building. It would seem to me that would apply more to single family residences than it does to apartment buildings, which can have very robust HVA systems and other kinds of mitigation. And of course, the actual highway is closer to these lots now than it was back in the day. So I guess I would say I'm still opposed. Others will cast their votes. If it doesn't pass, I'm happy to support, as in the past, getting the relief, because no, people shouldn't have to have trouble putting up an awning because of the unusual tweak that's in the zone. But you do owe us a degree of thanks, because of the fact that you can get extra lots in here. My understanding is that under the new housing encouragement law, you now only need a 50% vote to pass this in town meeting, rather than the 2/3 that applied 2 years ago. So you can say thank you before you leave. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Dan. Any other comments from the board? George, I guess, my concern on this is the amount of lots that, we received a letter from your client, and the relief asked for was really for, the addition or, configuration of doing something to the house on the lot. And I think, as Dan was saying, if there was a way to do an overlay, or even I'd be open, if this didn't pass, to something where I think in this town, we need more multi-zoning than actual single family lots, 8 or 7 or 8 single family lots. I'd rather see something of an overlay that would maybe even help that, if they were able to preserve a buffer and kind of contour to some type of overlay. So I'm not clear if relief is being asked for here, or if also the secondary part is the development. So if it's relief, I think we can add to that. If it's development, I think we might want to even look at that a little different, if we want to grant development relief to this area of town instead of just single family houses. So I guess my question to you is relief really the main concern here, or?
Well, I can tell you certainly, having represented one of the owners in that area, and also spoken with other owners that have wanted to do things, and in one instance they just could not do what they wanted to do. In another instance they could, but of course they had to go to the Board of Appeals, and
Right.
they basically didn't want to spend the money and take the time to go. So the relief is definitely a big part of this. And I will also say, at least in my experience, doing a zoning amendment to sort of craft special relief like that is a whole different exercise than simply moving lots from one zone to the zone that exists across the street. In my experience, usually something like that takes a lot longer. I mean, this took longer than we certainly expected in the beginning, but usually that's a whole different analysis and inquiry, and just becomes a whole process unto itself. And in fact, one of the efforts like that I was involved with essentially went into study, and it hasn't come out since, and that was like 8 years ago. So So I would be, I mean, personally, my experience is I'd be hesitant to go down a pathway like that, just because it is much more difficult and fraught with much more uncertainty and will take longer.
Okay, and I will commit, though, if this doesn't pass, that I would be help part of that effort with the planning board to try to, I think it is unfair that relief, that they're not able to get relief for just adding on or doing things to their home. So I would be in that camp. Mary Ann or Marcus, any further comments?
I don't have really any further comments other than echoing that I would share actions that aid in relief, that clearly aid in relief. And I also appreciate the thought about how an overlay could be considered for all the dimensions of an overlay.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson? Any?
No further comment other than what's been said. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Attorney Junta, thank you for your patience getting this. As Mr. Matthews said, it might have also had a benefit, but I appreciate the presentation, and we'll take this up later in the evening.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Take care.
Thank you all.
All right, moving on. Next item on the agenda, Town Manager. Ms. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we discussed at your last meeting, the last of the collective bargaining agreements that we've reached agreement with the units had not yet been voted by the union, and it has now. And that's the Independent Town Workers Association, which is our residual unit of clerical, administrative, and professional staff. We are recommending to the board today a 3-year agreement with the ITWA. That includes, as we talked about with the Public Works employees, a 0 COLA, no COLA for FY22, but the implementation of our new classification and compensation plan that is intended to ensure pay equity across all of our departments. We are proposing a 3-year contract, so the recommended increase in FY23 is a 1% base wage increase, and then in FY24, a 2.5% base wage increase. There are a number of clarification items. There's the inclusion of the new state mandated Juneteenth holiday, which we've negotiated. And we've worked to incorporate a remote work policy to take us past COVID in situations where employees can petition to do work offsite. And so we do recommend that the board approve and sign the memorandum of agreement.
Thank you, Ms. Fitzpatrick. Discussion on this item. And I will say, it's nice to have a 3-year term and get some predictability back in our finances and in our workforce. So thank you for that. Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, I would just say it's a good job to get the contract bargain. It is part of the, and I'm just kind of saying for Marcus's benefit, if it's helpful, and if not, you know, that it's just in the nature of the collective bargaining process that contracts get agreed to just before town meeting votes, because if town meeting doesn't approve the appropriation, nobody gets any of the changed benefits until the next time town meeting comes into session. So there's some incentive for everybody to get serious. And this is a fair agreement as I can see it. It's within the ability of the town to pay. It's been a tough year for everybody, for our customers, the citizens, for the families, for the kids, for the people that work for the town. But people have really pulled hard together. This is a group of union employees that do a good job for the town. It is a modest pay increase that's consistent with what's being paid in comparable communities. And I very much want to approve it and then recommend it to town meeting, and hopefully they'll see fit to ratify the appropriation.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a motion?
I will move that, please.
Okay. Is there a second?
I will second.
Right. Discussion. Hearing none, we come to the vote. Mary Ann,
Yes.
Marcus,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank
Our next item is to continue going through the status of warrant articles. So we have several articles to consider and then 2 motions to amend that we would ask the board to consider. So I would propose, Mr. Chair, to start with Article 1 of the special town meeting warrant, which is to fund the collective bargaining agreement that you just voted to approve.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recommend that I'd like to move that the board recommend approval of special town meeting Article 1.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, we come to the vote. Dan,
Yes.
Marcus,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you.
Next item would be Article 12, appropriate for planning consulting assistance, as we talked about earlier.
Any questions on that? I guess if we had some, we would have asked the planning board. Is there a motion?
I move approval, Mr. Chairman. That
Second.
we recommend approval.
Thank you. Motion and second to recommend approval. Any discussion? Hearing none, we come to the vote. Marcus,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you.
Next item is Article 35, appropriate for general fund cash capital. Mr. Chair, I recommend 2 things. That the board agreed to delete 2 items from the cash capital for FY22. The first is the Pollard School feasibility study at $280,000. We had a conversation with the finance committee chair and school committee chair and staff. And as was noted earlier, there will be an ongoing discussion, a lot of discussion on facility financing this summer. And it was agreed that this item should be discussed with the facility financing. The second item would be to postpone or defer the Ridge Hill building demolition. There were remaining questions, I know, on the part of the finance committee, and when we discussed this at your last meeting, really about whether there's any way to make that cost lower or to better understand the components of that cost. So I discussed with the finance committee and the project team and the PPBC to work on this over the summer and perhaps bring it back in October, but certainly have conversations with all those boards and the select board over the summer. So that would be amending Article 35 from $3,958,653 to $3,028,653.
Thank you, Ms. Fitzpatrick. And I think both of those are prudent items to remove for the time being until we have further study, and they're right to hopefully come back. So with that, any discussion? Actually, let me take a motion on Article 35.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval, that we recommend approval of Article 35 with the adjustments described by the town manager.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a discussion on any of those items?
I do, just because we have a few more people watching than usual, and we've been talking about the interrelationship between the decisions that we make and town revenues and the goals that we're trying to accomplish. One of the items that's being taken out of this article is feasibility study work at the Pollard School. And the reason that that's being taken out is not because it shouldn't be done, but because the Finance Committee correctly pointed out, why are you doing a feasibility study when you haven't got the money line? You haven't got a plan for how you're going to pay for the full project when you go get into really working seriously on the long-term future of this building. So this is an example where we had to try to think about how things are going to fit together. I'm happy to accept the Finance Committee's recommendation, but that means we're taking back a problem that we're going to have to be working on in the coming year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. And the plan is to have a facility meeting group with stakeholders and try to move forward to resolution on how we're going to not only pay for this plan, but what items are priority as we move forward with the school master plan. So thank you for that. And I think it's a good course of action. Further discussion? Hearing none, we come to the vote. Mary Ann?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Marcus?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you.
Next item, Mr. Chair, would be Article 37, the motion to amend. This is, the board voted to support the public safety building construction supplemental funding, as we talked about at the last meeting, due primarily to the hazardous materials found at Station 2, Fire Station 2, and COVID-related expenses. After the printing of the warrant, and the board actually had voted the amount printed in the warrant at 1.7 million, the Permanent Public Building Committee discussed the matter further and requested that the amount be lowered to 1.4 million. Finance Committee subsequently recommended adoption of this article at the 1.4 million. And I would recommend to the board that if the Permanent Public Building Committee believes that they can complete this project at that 1.4 million, it would make sense for the board to recommend adoption at that amount.
Thank you. And we've had numerous discussions on this. This is a priority of our town to complete this project. And it's nice that we have buy-in from the Finance Committee, as well as that recommendation from the PPPC that they can do it at that amount. So with that, is there a motion to recommend adoption?
Motion.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, we come to the vote. Dan?
Yes.
Marcus?
Yes.
Marianne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you.
Next item, Mr. Chair, would be Article 5 of the annual town meeting warrant, Highway Commissioner 1 zoning.
Is there a motion to recommend adoption?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board recommend adoption of Articles 5 and Article 6 by town meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Further discussion. We had the planning board in, for those tuning in late, with a presentation that to me helped answer some questions and laid out really what the changes were from last time and the revenue being generated from this. And my thoughts would go to town meeting with this and support the planners and look for a vote in the affirmative. Any further discussion? Hearing none, yes, Mr. Matthews.
I just would like to speak a little bit because I won't be the principal speaker at town meeting, but I feel strongly about this. And this is a kind of a decision where we've had a contentious process that's gone on for years. We had a measure that went to town meeting. It received a majority vote, but not the 2/3 required for passage. And the planners have taken him back and worked on it. To me, it come back to the basic business. It is very important that the town manage its commercial areas in a very careful way. Careful in terms of the employment opportunities and the quality of businesses there, careful in terms of the impact on traffic and neighborhood areas, and careful in terms of the revenues that we hope to generate, because those revenues pay for things that people need. In speaking to the revenue side of it, I just want to say it's really in big part about two things: kids and seniors at both ends of the scale. Kids, because 2/3 of our property tax dollars are used for school purposes in one way or another. And I talked at length before about the capital planning, but it affects operational costs that increase in excess of our annual Proposition 2.5 allowance on a regular basis for a lot of good reasons. And people are committed to having good schools here. And at the other end of the scale, if you do the back of the envelope calculations about the way our system works at taxing our business properties at 175% of their fair market value, and the relatively small draw that they make on our town expenses, it effectively is a subsidy of 10% on every residential tax bill in town. And that doesn't happen magically or automatically. That is the way it works because of years of careful planning and development here in town. And that is a real benefit as people get up and the bills have to keep going up to pay for everything else we need. And some folks get older and their incomes are fixed, or they have other problems and needs that their incomes are a little more stretched than they might be at an earlier phase in life. And it isn't just seniors, but I'm mentioning now. So this is a community decision. There's a lot of things to balance out. There are a lot of strong opinions, and we've all heard a lot of them. But I'm satisfied that this is a good piece of work done by the planning board over a long period of time, listening, getting good expert opinion, and using their own good judgment that they're elected to do. I fully support it and hope to support it at town meeting and hope that it will be adopted. And that's why I've moved approval.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson?
Yes, and with everything being said and having the planning board on tonight and listening to all of you, I'm behind most of it, but I think I just need I'm going to need a little bit more time to hear more and be fully on board before I can vote yes to this. But that's just me personally.
Okay. So we are going to try to vote this, and it looks like that would be an abstention, Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Okay. When it comes to, not to try to call your vote, but I just want to get a lay of the land. I will just say there's been a lot of concern about the bulk of this and about the impact to the neighborhood, which I completely understand. But I think we have to have a blueprint somewhere, and we have to upzone this piece. And I think that this zoning does that. And I think, as I said earlier, when it comes to the special permit process, and we look at the fiscal impact analysis, they have a traffic study done, and we get the details, is when the planning board will make that final decision of what will work in that area. But without this, we really have nothing except a fallback to a warehouse, which I don't think any of us wants in that zone. So to me, this is a path forward, and I look forward to supporting that. Mr. Matthews.
I just wanted to say one other thing, because
Yes.
I appreciate Marcus's situation. Coming into this board, the way our system is structured, where the whole year comes up and we come up to town meeting and all of a sudden we've got to decide 50 articles as to make our final recommendations on, and contracts are being signed, and difficult issues that have had a lot of contention in the community come before. There's no harm in abstaining until you're all set and ready to go. That does mean we'll keep trying. I'm going to keep trying to convince you to vote yes up until the vote at town meeting. But what you've done, that course of action is perfectly reasonable under the circumstances. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I concur. It's a lot to, digest at once, and we've all been there. Good. Ms. Cooley.
I was also going to recognize, so I do think, in looking at these uses, that the neighborhood has been and will continue to be taken into consideration. In terms of thinking and hoping and expecting uses that will have lower impact and traffic that's headed in the neighborhood's direction versus traffic that is more oriented to the highway. I think we've heard some other suggestions of things that would have greater impact potentially into the neighborhood or headed in that direction. And also, as part of a longer term, everybody may or may not recall that we made a decision not to rezone the rest of the space down to the field, because we felt, in fact, that part from the other side of the railroad tracks down to the field to Mills is actually quite different and quite more neighborhood oriented, and was going to take much more thought as to how it could appropriately be rezoned at some point in the future. So that's yet another piece of work as everybody's looking at everything.
Great comments. Okay, so we have a getting back to an emotion in a second. We've had our discussion. Ms. Cooley.
Yes.
Mr. Matthews.
Yes.
Mr. Nelson. And the chair votes yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that motion was Articles 5 and 6, correct?
That's correct.
So then the last item for the warrant is the citizens petition, as Mr. Attorney Junta outlined earlier.
Okay. Mr. Matthews.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the board recommend a no vote on the citizens petition at town meeting under Article 7. 7.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Discussion.
Just to speak to it a little bit, we have discussed it. All town meeting members have received a mailing from the proponents that talk about the issues of the relief. I have no problem with relief, and I agree with what Marianne said earlier. I believe that actually that granting relief in a limited context like this is actually very doable, particularly if the planning board gets the $60,000 worth of consulting that we want them to have. But even without that, I think that it's not an impossible drafting job. And it should at least have been attempted before doing something like this. We've had no one has told the public about the extra lots as far as I know. And I think that some people would be surprised if they found, and I believe that drawing the additional lots is the driving force behind that. Not to say that relief isn't an element, but drawing the extra lots is what drives this. We have a lot of issues that we're trying to work on in terms of trying to increase the availability of market-priced moderate income housing or subsidized housing, but I have not seen a demand to try to shoehorn in additional large houses in an area which in a previous iteration of arguments about housing policy, it was the town's position that this is an area where building this large houses this close to the highway, which is basically adjacent at this stage, is advisable. So for the environmental reasons and in order to preserve the open space and also to assure that the issues that are created by this are fully discussed at town meeting, I recommend that we vote no.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Mr. Nelson, do you have a question?
I think there was a typo because the one I'm looking at, it says that it's Article 8, but in the presentation it says Article 7. So I just saw one of each. I just want to be clear.
Yeah, I believe that's because that's our worksheet. It has the 8, but because some things were taken out, but it's 7 in the printed warrant.
Correct. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's 7 in the warrant.
That's what I tripped over when I started to offer the motion. So thank you.
Thank you. Marianne, any comments? Okay. I would just say it's unclear to me, and we received a letter and I understand the relief aspect. And I'm fine, as we talked about, with an overlay, doing something to help with that relief. I'm also fine if there was a proposal that spelled out exactly how this would change that area that we could look at and say, okay, here are the consequences, and then we could have a deeper discussion on that. Or is there an overlay that we could have maybe some type of multifamily, but preserve a buffer? That I'd be okay with that. But on its face, it looks like it's relief. And then I think the consequences of it are more than that. So I'd rather see something either narrowly tailored to that relief or a broader discussion on here's what I would like to do with this whole area as far as rezoning it, and here's what the consequences would be. And Ms. Cooley.
It's quite interesting because if it were relief only, it would need to vote, it would need to pass by 2/3, right? Because it's not relief only, it's been determined that it only needs a 50% threshold to pass. It gets very complicated that this is the first, again, in the first example of this type of the new law, but yet another reason I think for us to be all in when it comes to relief, but it's not clear that this is the best vehicle for that.
Thank you for that. That's a good point too. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we come to the vote, and this is to not support Article 7. Marianne.
Yes, I do not support Article 7.
Marcus.
Yes.
Dan.
Yeah, yes or no.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I should have mentioned before. I actually have two other things I wanted to speak about on positions on articles. The first is just passing back to 5 and 6, the question of amendments. Marianne is our designated speaker on amendments to Articles 5 and 6. I said my own view during our discussion, and I know that when we get at town meeting, if something unanticipated happens, then the board, which will technically be in session, will caucus to decide how to proceed. But the public isn't, because of the nature of the thing, the public is going to not have much view of what we're doing or talking about in deciding. So I would like to simply make it clear that Mary Ann, by virtue of our vote, or to take another vote if we need to, is authorized to recommend a vote against any amendment not approved by the planning board at town meeting as to Articles 5 and 6.
And Mary Ann?
I would have said, the thing that we keep saying is we have not seen approved amendments from the moderator and don't have any in front of us. Dan, well, fundamentally, we all believe and support the zoning that has been proposed at this point. I don't think I can comment on something that is not concretely in front of us.
I
And
guess
so
I just
think
want you
we
to be
need
able to
leave it.
use your own judgment. I trust you to do whatever, and I know it can be complicated. I don't want to have to take another vote with the public wondering, what are those people doing up there?
Well, we're not unaccustomed to doing that in the moment. And if that's what it has to be, that's what it has to be.
Okay.
So.
And I agree. I don't want to give an advisory opinion. I understand the intent of it. I completely understand that, but I think we just have to wait until things are before us and then discuss it at that time and vote it at that time. But I think we've been clear on our support for these articles, and absent something unusual, that we would just be willing to move forward that the planning board recommends.
Then the other thing is, I am the designated speaker, Mr. Chairman, on Article 49, which is the citizens petition on requiring people to, only keep their trash barrels out for their private haulers for a limited period of time. I just wanted to say that if I don't intend to speak, I'm not doing a presentation, but if some question were asked, the nature of my comments would be based on the conclusions that I've drawn, which is, this is a citizen's petition which came before us in a rough form a couple of years ago, and again was courteously held back. The one that came before us before had a lot of what looked almost jumped off the page as possible, catch-22s and possible misinterpretations or problems. This is pretty narrowly, I'm just stating in my own opinion, and town council could give a different version. This is pretty narrowly written. It's plainly written. It is understandable to the town meeting members, and they will vote yes or no as to whether or not they want to have that kind of rule here. So if I'm called upon for any questions, I'll probably say something benign about it, and then hopefully I won't be called upon at all. But if it happens, I wanted to at least let you know what my own thinking was before I get up to the mic.
I appreciate that, Mr. Matthews. I don't know if we'd even be recognized because of our no position taken, but that would be a question for the moderator. And I agree, on its face, it looks like it has a lot of merit, but I don't know the consequences of such an article, what it would mean in practicality. So thank you for those comments. Any further discussion of the board before I go back to Ms. Fitzpatrick? None. Okay. Kate?
Mr. Chair, on advice from the moderator, we will be posting motions to amend by town meeting members, clearly identifying them as motions to amend by town meeting members, and we'll post them to the section of the website where that article is, given that there's no hall where a town meeting member could put the copy of the motion to amend. So we expect to have at least one up tomorrow that's been approved. So there's one. I believe there may be two more motions coming if they haven't come to us already. So we'll have those up. Then our next item, Mr. Chair, there's just, you said three things. So we have three things. First is a reminder that the Needham Employee Resource Group Stronger Together is hosting a community workshop called Understanding the Impact of COVID-19 in Communities of Color. And our own Dr. Piemi will be leading that presentation, so that we're really looking forward to that. That's May 6th at 6 p.m. via Zoom. And that flyer has been posted on Facebook, and we'll be making sure it's available on the website and by newsflash, so people who want to sign up for that can find it. I know I've received several of them emailed back to me, so I know a lot of people are emailing it around so that word gets out. So that's exciting.
Great.
I wanted to update the board on a pop-up program and a local grant that we got to support local business, and I would ask Mr. Chair if Katie King can update you on that.
Please.
Thank
Katie.
you, Mr. Chair. So recently, the town received a grant of $133,000 from the Massachusetts Office of Business Development. And this was in partnership with the City of Newton. And it's going to support what we're calling Project Pop-Up, which is a pilot where we're going to be matching entrepreneurs and people who have small businesses that don't necessarily have a brick and mortar space. They might be a new entrepreneur or somebody that's been primarily online. So we're going to be partnering them with commercial spaces in town that are currently vacant for temporary, for a few months. And that location will be heavily subsidized to allow the retailer to have a chance to introduce their company to a broader market and give a test run for what it would be like to have a real storefront. So the goal is really to activate the downtown and keep vacant spaces alive as we're coming back out of the pandemic, and hopefully support some small businesses in the meantime. And I just want to give a plug. Let me look at the website. We are actively seeking applicants. So if you are an artist or a retailer or a food purveyor and you're interested in participating in the program, we're accepting applications now through Monday, May 3rd. The website is project-pop-up.com. And you can find it on the town's website as well. So I want to give a special thank you to Amy Hilson, our economic development manager. She's been working really hard on this. And those spaces will be activated June through August. So watch this space.
Great.
Here, I would add that Amy has reported that she's had nothing but amazing feedback from property owners who are willing to support this. So that's been very helpful.
Terrific. And again, that's project-pop-up.
Correct.
Great.
.com.
.com. That's great. Marianne?
So I just want to thank, everybody in the town who's worked so hard on this. And this one in particular was a partnership with Newton. We had actually had some outreach from the town of Wellesley about partnering on this same potential grant opportunity. And that one didn't happen, but we've done some other partnerships with Wellesley. I think all of those that we're doing across various communities are continuing to build and strengthen relationships that we have with these communities that abut us that are working on some of the same issues. We've continued to really focus on, and I'm thankful to everybody at the town, on grant opportunities that we have available. We haven't won every one, but we have won quite a few, and they have benefit our efforts to maintain a vibrant downtown and to try to keep all of our various restaurants and merchants afloat, which is a priority for all of us. So, kudos. It's been a long year. We're not out of it yet. And I think the state surfaced some more grant money today for shared streets. And hopefully we'll be back again trying to figure out what else we can do next, but we'll continue to work.
Agreed. Thank you, Marianne. It's a lot of hard work, and it's nice to see the partnership and the marriage with the businesses and the empty storefronts, and congratulations. Thank you.
Great. So the last item is that, as the board may know, that in the 1st of April, April 5th, I think, the MBTA converted virtually all of its system to a different model of commuter rail service, so that rather than having these AM peaks and PM peaks that no longer exist, they went to more of an every hour service, which they actually have documented that has already had in the just a couple of weeks a positive impact on ridership. So they approached us this week about the weekend service in Needham. As you know, has not been operating. Needham hasn't had Sunday service, I don't believe, in decades, but on Saturday service had been deferred for a while. They had approached us that they are looking to implement Saturday and Sunday commuter rail service system-wide, and is there a way that that could happen in Needham? And I thought they were very creative in terms of wanting to expand access for our residents in the city, but also for residents of the city and all of the places along the line to Needham, where we know that we have people who use it for reverse commuting on Saturdays, and so the theory is, of course, that they might need it on Sundays. One of the concerns that that the MBTA is very mindful of is train horn noise and commuter vehicles going through town on Sunday. And so what they've proposed for both Saturday and Sunday is that the train service be every 2 hours from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. and terminate at the junction, and then turn around at that turnaround that they have maintained at the junction and go back out to the city. And so it would mean that there wouldn't be service at Needham Center and Needham Heights, but it also would mean that there is 5 at-grade crossings for which there wouldn't be train horn for all of those train trips. So it seems like a very creative option for us. They have asked for our feedback. And I do feel like it would be useful for us to ask the residents and commuters both what their thoughts are on that. And so we propose to solicit comment, but also have what might be a brief public hearing at your meeting on May 11th, which is already very full. But in order for them to implement this, which they're hoping to do, I believe, late June, they have asked for a feedback by May 14th. So if that makes sense to the board, we would schedule it and get the word out. The question is whether we would want to have, if that would be possible, a representative of the MBTA. I'm not sure they would be able to do that, but whether the board thinks that's important or not.
I'll open up Marcus. Yeah.
So a couple of things. I think it definitely makes sense to get the public input on that, and whether it's May 11th, I think that's going to be vital. And then also, I lost my train of thought. Come back to me. Hold on 1 second.
Come back to you. Don't worry. Don't worry.
The train's coming in on Sunday.
So during our meeting, it's funny because, we were having a discussion, wondering what they were going to do with weekend service and if they were going to cut Saturday and keep it that way. And I think we're both caught so off guard. They said, what do you think? It's like, well, what do we think? We need to ask what the public, what they think. We haven't even had a chance to discuss this. So I think it's wise to have the public hearing and actually hear from the public. And with that, I'll go back to Marcus and then to Mary.
Okay. So in the end, if we provide comment and the feedback from the public and everything and give it back to them, it's still up to them, correct? So no matter what, it's not really on us.
Yep.
In fact, but we can give all the feedback and as much input as we want. But just keeping that in mind, I think the public should know that.
Yeah, exactly. And Mr. Chair, if I may, the T has not been using the layover facility in Needham Heights. They actually say that by running every hour, they're using fewer pieces of equipment and they're able to manage the service. They believe they can run the service that's needed. As you know, when they had proposed to eliminate, at least temporarily, the layover facility, we were concerned about impact on service. I think it's important to note that we don't know what's going to happen in the future and that the MBTA could bring that service back, but that we'll have more conversation with them at that time if they do.
Right. And as long as it's running smoothly, I know the budding residences, they've come to us many times. They see a benefit to this system as long as it keeps it running smoothly. Mary Ann?
I was really excited to hear this proposal. And so definitely I do support a hearing for the public. I don't think that it's necessary for the MBTA to be there that evening for this, but I do think it should be open for the public to weigh in. I think it would be wonderful if we were able to have this on both Saturday and Sunday on a regular basis. I think there's huge benefits. I actually would probably love to see us go to 10 p.m. on a Saturday night. So if people wanted to go into town for dinner, that could be an option too. But the day would be a huge benefit compared to where we are now.
Right. And I also don't think we need to have a representative. I think any questions we can forward to them and they can answer. Otherwise, it would, I think, turn into a long Q&A if we went that way. Right. Any further comment? Okay, thank you. And next item on the agenda, board discussion, Nuwari update. Ms. Cooley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Nuwari met last night following our pattern of meeting the night before board meetings, select board meetings. And we did approve the report to town meeting members. So that report will go out, as I understand, in the next mailing. We started our meeting by reviewing the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey data with a lens on it, looking at racial outcomes in particular areas with respect to harassment and bullying and cyberbullying, and then with respect to protective measures like the relationship with an adult in the school, that type of thing. And what we did see was data that was different between the middle school and the high school. We saw data that raised some questions that we don't actually have answers to now that we looked at it. The schools think that perhaps they didn't look at it this way back in 2018, and it was data from 2018 because that was around the same time that they were doing the racial equity audit, but they were glad that they had gone back and revisited it and agreed that when they do the survey again sometime in the fall, they look forward to coming back to Newari with updated data and with also being sure that they consider this lens as they're looking at the updated data. And we're going to think about, were there any other questions that should be part as they looked at it in the fall as well. So all of that will happen going forward. The other piece that we spent some time talking about was we talked about the constitution of the committee. For example, with Sunecki's going off the school committee, there will be a new school committee member. We had a couple of members who had dropped off of Newari, who had been originally part of Newari. So as we look at the work ahead for the next year, there was some discussion among the committee, and it will come back to this board, I think, for some further discussion at a future meeting. But three particular areas were highlighted by the committee as potentials for considering adding somebody for the work ahead over the next year. And that was somebody conceivably from housing in Needham, from the Needham Housing Authority, for example, a representative from the police department, so that we have them definitely at the table and thinking with us about this work, and potentially a student, this time from the high school, who might be able to make that commitment. So we'll come back to the board for further discussion there. But our goal would be, if we are to expand the committee, to solicit for people who would be interested in participating in that, to do some interviewing and to get people added to the committee as quickly as possible, given the challenge of everybody still, getting back into the group and getting into the groove again, that we've sort of developed over the last year as we move forward. So that's my summary. You or Marcus, I don't know if either of you want to add any notes. That's my quick.
Thank you, Marianne. Marcus, any comments on last night?
I think you hit everything pretty well. When I come to the 2021 data that we're going to get, I'll be really intrigued to see what we come up with and how we kind of rethink maybe the questions that we're asking and kind of talk to the school about that. And then also, when we have other people that are going to be a part of this and voting that through, or what we do for the select board, I think when we do the outreach and we're talking to more people in the community, what kind of focus groups that we're doing, and that kind of analysis and survey data that we're doing, that is going to go in line with kind of how we kind of rethink our charge, or how we're peeling back a little bit to try to come back to the board and do the best work possible with the input from the community in different spots that may not have been represented in things that we've done so far. So I know we've gotten some feedback about that. So interested to see how we tackle that and how we just engage the community more when we're making these decisions.
Thank you. Very true. Thanks, Marcus. Dan.
Yeah, I'd like to throw out a few thoughts, and I'm sorry, I take a lot of time tonight, so I'll apologize and try to be better and on the limits of
Finish tonight.
But this is such an important thing, and I'm mindful. All the other members in the room served on Newari. I'm the only one that didn't, but I watched every meeting to the extent that I could. And so I was in the position that all the people in the audience that are watching us now, and I know from that, half the time I really I had some things to say, and the other half I was glad I wasn't in the room. This is tough, very difficult work that you guys have done, and all three of you deserve a great thanks from the community, as well as all the other members of the committee, but you're here. These are discussions that people, at least in my experience, would have a tough time talking with their own friends and family in their own living room about. You guys went on townwide TV with a group with people, some of whom you'd never met before, and you worked at it over a period of a year, and you've produced a vision statement and the guidelines to go to town meeting that I think are a framework that will help us go forward. I want to comment on some of the discussion about the framing of the committee going forward, because that is something, because there was discussion about a couple of things, whether to shift from being an advisory to an action committee, or drawing in additional appointees who work in town departments. It's important to me that Nuwari be an advisory committee, because I need the input from me. Of course, this was an all-white board when we started this, so it was particularly important to be advisory. But who knows where we're going forward? It's the experience and the advice, and I don't always take the advice that I get, but I want the good advice, and that's a big part of doing this. In terms of action, I think there's always a frustration from anybody that works in the town government to be frustrated about how little we're supposed to be so powerful and how little we actually can do, because this is a very decentralized form of government with a great many checks and balances. But actually, any authority that an action committee would have would be authority that we delegated out from our board, and we already don't feel we've got enough to do everything that we want. So it's better to get the advice, come here, make some plans, and then reach out to those other boards and committees and persuade them to go along with us, as we've been doing with getting the approvals on the guidelines that you guys have done. I think that's the right model. Second, it isn't really that important to have people come in who work in different departments, not because I'm dismissive of that. But this is a part of the problem that I actually can talk about. This decentralized structure still has a setting in which 99% of the employees answer ultimately to two people, the town manager and the superintendent of schools. So if the schools and the town administration, this board and the school committee are represented, that's your main thing. Maybe we should have an appointee of a recommendation from the moderator, because the only other town employee reports to the board that doesn't report to anybody else, reports to the board that he appoints. But setting that aside, the key thing that I'm looking for is not their particular roles, but three things. That they come to the work with a determination to help us work together as neighbors. That they bring lived experience to the table that can help move these discussions forward. And in particular, that the BIPOC and particularly Black lens is always at the table when this work is being done. Because it is, to me, the Black experience that most needs improvement to equality and equity in our town. And I truly believe that with all the different kinds of issues that arise and the kinds of distractions that we're subject to that cause things that we want to do not to happen, if the Black boats can be lifted, all the boats will be lifted. So I thank you. I also urge you to keep as many of the current members on as you can. I know Susan is leaving because she's not on the school committee. I understand that Matt has to step down, and I think that's the logical choice, so as not to have a quorum of this board there. But I greatly appreciate both the work that Matt and Sue have done. But I think that in terms of encouraging all the other members to stay on, that would be great, because this second year is going to build on the first year. And I just think it's just been a big plus for us and points to some good things in the future. And of course, Marcus and Marianne, you guys have been great. And so that's why I'm really holding you to stay in your roles on this, because it's a terrific help. And thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And we're going to have much more discussion on the constitution of this group as we move forward. I will say, and as you stated, I do have to step down, or decided to step down. I didn't have to, as to not have a quorum on the board and not to seem like a select boards group. But I did enjoy our discussions, and hopefully I provided some input, valuable input to that committee. And I really look forward to my time there. It was terrific. I will just add, we have the Human Rights Committee, which does have a police officer representative, and as well as a couple, I think, students on that, which I think is terrific. And I just want to make sure that we're not mirroring that. I think Nuwari brings its own kind of fresh perspective, and I just want to make sure that who we select brings that different lens, and no matter what area they're from, as we get this group together. So Mary Ann?
So I do agree, and I think the voice that people bring is very important. This was a committee that was constituted by design as a majority minority committee, and absolutely needs to be maintained so that the voices and the lived experiences are at the table. But I think there was also a desire on the part of the committee to be sure that in the key areas, and housing and policing are at the top of the list for priorities for this group, that the folks who can make a difference there are going to be at the table and invested in being successful going forward. And I appreciate that insight, and I believe it is something that we should honor. So.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Yes, Marcus.
Wanted to piggyback off what Mary Ann said and how vital it will be according to what our group has discussed, having that representation there as we continue to think about how we're going to, restructure or add, or people leaving, to have those people that can help, not even dictate, to influence or give real feedback and bring it back to the decision makers that are at the top of our priority list. So I'm not thinking about mirroring the Human Rights Committee. I'm thinking about doing what's best for New Ari and how we can best serve this town and the board. So I just want to echo what Mary Ann said, and that is something that we discussed last night, and I feel like that's something that we should heavily consider, if not make sure we do that.
Great. We'll be leaning on you, the two of you, as the representatives for guidance. Absolutely. Mary Ann?
Well, I was just going to say, when I should probably frame for everybody else who's not in this work as closely as we are, but a very key part of the work ahead for the next year is to identify where, who, what, when within the town structures and organizations is going to be accountable for taking this work forward and for making the goals that are articulated happen, and for setting new goals that are in keeping with the vision and the guiding principles. So being able to make that accountability occur is what we're all about for the next year.
Great. Dan, and then Marcus.
Yeah, and then I think one of the ways that can happen, that I hope people would see as working, is I really need, for me, the ideas and the input to come from New Ari here. Then it becomes the job of this board to reach out to the different departments or agencies. Take, for example, the housing authority. I think it's important to have a housing tenant, particularly a minority housing tenant, on New Ari, because that is the experience of living in public housing is something that it very likely really will inform these discussions. On the other hand, the housing authority itself is actually a state agency. The kinds of interactions that an advisory committee can have with them are not going to move the ball. On the other hand, if recommendations come back here as to things that should be happening, then the select board can, in conjunction with the town manager, work across that state town boundary to work with the housing authority to see what, if any, improvements that are identified can be addressed. So it's the experience that's needed at the New Ari table, in my opinion, as opposed to the institutional role. I hope that helps.
I agree with that, Dan. Marcus?
I think just finishing with the communication piece, as far as what people initially thought our charge was and what we were doing to what we actually do, I think that is something that people just need to become more aware of. And we need to, as we talked about, discussing a way to communicate that widely, and as far as what our charges were and what tasks we have completed, started, or are in progress, I think are really important, because I think a lot of the perception has been we were supposed to have more of a action oriented, but that was never the case. So I think just being really, really transparent about that. And I know we talked about different ways how we can push that out, and that's still in discussion about how we can do that. But just making sure, I know the people on this call that may know, that may not know, as far as like what our intent was and how we've kind of progressed. And this next year is going to be really vital as far as accountability and measuring these things. But then also, it's not going to be on New Ari to carry these out. It's going to be on the select board to help find the groups, that are going to do this and hold themselves accountable So I think I just want to clarify that.
Great, absolutely. And we facilitate, we get advice, and then it's our job to facilitate as our board. So thank you for that. And Marion, thank you for the update. I don't see, no one has any more committee reports. I don't see anyone told me about them. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'll come to the vote. Marcus,
Yes.
Marianne,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. And let's wish for great weather. Looks, don't want to jinx it, but let's hope for that and see you at town meeting. Good night, everybody.
You all have a good night.